Okay, this is Michael with TAPS, TAPS, True American Posterity Sovereigns hyphen PMA, Private Membership Association. We're doing meetings to discuss for the American people the truth about America, the Constitutional Republic, posterity, who the owners of this nation are, what the government is. Just all the information is on the website, taps-pma.org or .com. And I'm having these discussions for multiple reasons. Number one, because we're putting out the information that we're privy to, what we know to be true and accurate. It's the leading bit of information that exists with reference to the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America and the founders who founded it, their blood posterity, privity of blood rights, who really the owners of the country are, what the government is, the corporate government versus the Constitutional Republic, and who really has what rights in this nation. Again, we've indicated in other meetings that a 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, according to Supreme Court rulings and law, is a property of the U.S. government and a franchise of the U.S. government. They have only limited rights that have been granted to them by the government, which is not the case with posterity, who by blood are descendants of the founders of this nation and therefore have all rights, privileges, and immunities. That causes a little bit of a stir in some people's minds because people have this false notion that, hey, if you're an American, you're equal. We're all equal. We all have the same rights. That makes no sense, because that would be like, again, saying if any given person thought to themselves, I'm going to go get 20,000 acres of property, put a fence around it, put it in will for my family, and then somebody's going to tell them that everybody else in the world has equal rights to that land. It's the exact same equivalent thing. Now, there's a bunch of patriotic movements that have been going on that I highly suspect are psyops, psychological operations that are being put forth by the very people I have been calling out for the past 4 years at thebigvirushoax.com and at righteousarmy.org, who are the ones that are endeavoring to create a new world order, one world government agenda, a one world corporation where they own everybody and they own all nations. That's their objective. That's their goal. They plan on owning anybody and everybody in the world. And they're doing a variety of psychological operations to confuse people and to manipulate and to steer people the direction they want them to go. I believe they're even in the process of trying to put forth a constitutional republic of the United States of America 2.0. Forget about the original republic. Let's create a new brand, a new breed. And that is unacceptable. It's unlawful. It would be unconstitutional. Many issues would have to be addressed before even such a thing could take place. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to sabotage the original constitutional republic, which they have already done by having that constitutional republic replaced by the current federal government, which is in fact a corporation, and that corporation is owned in fact by the Crown of England. So the government that is currently acting in Washington, D.C. as the government for the American people is a corporation. That's a fact. We can provide all the proof of that in this conversation. We have in others, but many people don't know that. They need to know it. It's a corporation, and it has a Dun and Bradstreet number, and all of its subsidiaries, all the states were turned into corporations. All the counties were turned into corporations. So they are all part of what we would refer to as a federal territorial plane. They are not the government of the Constitutional Republic of the United States of America, which is currently not occupied, but it can be occupied. And this is where there's more problems, because there's a variety of patriotic movements around the country that claim to be trying to put that government back together. I believe most of them, if not all of them, are part of the psychological operation of putting together a false one, a secondary replacement for the Constitutional Republic. I personally know David Lester Straight, God bless him. He just passed away a week ago. My son and I got to talk to him on the phone about a week prior to his death, and we were going to go see him, and unfortunately we didn't make it in time because we had to go to Tennessee. We planned on going to see him after our trip to Tennessee, but we found out when we were in Tennessee that he had just passed. David Straight has done a tremendous job of waking people up and giving them a great amount of information. David has agreed with me and my son in numerous phone conversations to everything that we have put forth at TAPS-PMA. He totally understands and agrees with bloodline sovereignty, bloodline posterity, who the owners of this nation are. He's in lockstep with that. He is, but he was never promoting that in his seminars. That led me at times to wonder if David Straight himself was somehow working for, we all refer to the Vatican, right? All roads lead to Rome. We know that the Vatican papal institution, biblically speaking, even is the beast power in Daniel and Revelation. So to the extent that there's a lot of psychological operations being put forth by patriotic movements, the Q psyop, oh, the Vatican's been unseated, oh, they're not in control anymore. There's a lot of false information being put out to make people think that, so that they can continue moving forward with their objective and their agenda, which is a New World Order, One World Government agenda. And that New World Order, One World Government agenda, which I've harped on for years now, is all about destroying sovereign nations. Nations means nativity, which means birth, which means race, racial identity. They've created this notion that race is about color of skin. Race is about much more than color of skin. It's hairstyle, facial features, bone structure, lifestyle, customs, traditions, cultures, language. Race isn't just about color of skin. That's another psyop they put out so they could shame people and make people say things like, oh, the color of your skin doesn't matter. No, it doesn't. But racial integrity does matter. Racial identity does matter. And they've done their best to do away with that, because that's precisely what they're trying to do away with. Do away with nations, do away with racial identity, racial integrity, do away with gender identity, no more male, no more female, and ultimately do away with humanity and merge humanity with microchips and AI and robotics. Because they are godless. Destroy nature, destroy this earth, and destroy humanity. That's what they're about. So that's what I've been being, I believe, inspired and used by the Creator, Lord God Almighty, to point out and to identify and to expose for the last 4 years. Again, initially with thebigvirushoax.com, which has the best of the best information on it regarding anything and everything about alleged and so-called viruses, the jabs, what's in them, why they came out with them, what they're doing to people, the face masking, obedience, submission, the whole initiative they have to get people to submit to their authority, and ultimately to break down, again, nations, people, racial identity, gender identity, humanity itself, and then control it all. One of the things that's significant is I read the Supreme Court reading. A good attorney friend of mine, who actually helped me to get custody of my son when he was a little boy, Albert Diamond, great attorney, was the one that pointed me to and told me, Mike, read this case. I read the entire Supreme case. I don't remember it. It was over a year ago, but it very specifically said in there the Supreme Court has ruled that companies, corporations cannot claim anything in nature of ownership. They can't claim ownership or possession of anything that's natural. But if they alter the genes, they can claim ownership of it. And we know that the jabs that are being put out are gene altering. They are experimental vaccines that are changing and altering gene modification in people. And when they do that, they can claim ownership of the people who have received the jabs and had their genes altered. The Supreme Court has ruled they have the right to do that, that they can do that. So this is where, the term pure blood is much more meaningful than just not being jabbed. Pure blood means your racial identity as well, your bloodline. In fact, that's where this conversation that I'm trying to have with the American people and the people that join in with us is a big part of what needs to be discussed. The fact that there are unique different peoples around the world that should have their own sovereignty in their own nations. But again, since they're endeavoring to break all that down and conglomerate everything into one, that's at odds. And of course, the USA, the United States of America, under Satan's authority, I call it, with Hollywood, with all their perverted movies and the television programming, the way that they're just distorting human minds with the social trends. It's just disgusting what they've done to demoralize and destroy the United States of America within. And yet it's all about amalgamation, multiculturalism, the breaking down. There is no race, there is no gender. We're all one big happy family. They're using false Christianity to promote that with bastardizing the word love. Oh, we all love each other. If you're Jesus, if you're in Jesus, you love and we love. So they've got this false Christianity facilitating their effort to shame people and make people think that if you're a real Christian and you love people, then you accept everybody for who and what they are, whether they're a lesbian couple or a homosexual couple getting married, or they're an LGBT group going to your children's kindergarten class to show them what being LGBTQ is all about. We're all just one big happy family. That's their perverse, satanic, demonic, godless agenda. I've been exposing it and calling it out in every aspect for the last 4 years. And right now we are at the tip of the spear because we are pointing out that there are Americans in the United States of America who are bloodline descendants, posterity of the very founding fathers that created this nation. And when they created it, they said, we secure the blessings of liberty unto ourselves and our posterity. They were looking out for themselves, their family, their bloodline, and their lineage. And that's what's in law dictionaries. That's what's in Supreme Court rulings. That's what's in common sense. That's what initially was in common law. But they're trying to change everything and give people new ideas and new impressions of what is, new concepts and new ideas about even posterity. Oh, we're everybody that's in America now, all out there drinking and going to the ball games and enjoying basketball and sitting down in front of their televisions and going to the movies. But we're all Americans wearing our red, white, and blue. We're all Americans. We're the posterity. Wrong. That's not what posterity is. In fact, when you go back to the fact that there's a lot of people in this country that even people who are patriotic that might not even be posterity, because they're patriotic, they're upset about all the illegals that are being flooded into our nation. Now, many of those people have the opportunity to actually be a part of the Republic of the United States of America and even be grafted in because they come from the same lineage, the same stock. America was created by white European Protestant Christians who came over here to establish a nation under God. So it was initially created as a godly nation. And obviously, again, that's been torn down and destroyed. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. Having laid that out, I'm going to try to get Grant on the phone here one more time because Patricia wanted to point out a few things. And before she does, and before I make the call, let me just again reiterate, some of these patriotic movements, I mentioned David Straight, and again, I mentioned the fact that he was in agreement with me and Josh on bloodline posterity and privity of blood. He agrees with that. He agreed with everything, but he was not promoting that in as many seminars that he did. He was waking people up to the fact of a corporate government and, essentially saying, I don't want to be a 14th Amendment. No. Stop it, boys. Okay, Josh, can we get them to stop?
Stop.
Shut the window. No, Ranger, stop. So he was not promoting that in his seminars, and that's very frustrating because I lost my train of thought. And it was a really significant point I'm going to make. Can you close the window so when he sees, can you shut that blind for me, John? That way, if he sees something there, he doesn't start barking. That was very distracting for listeners, I'm sure, as it certainly was for me. So David Straight agrees whenever we had conversations with him on these issues, but he was never really promoting it in his seminars. He was just promoting, again, the big thing with him was, let me no longer be a 14th Amendment citizen. But there's a problem with that, because if a person who's a 14th Amendment citizen who does not have a legitimate or lawful standing in the United States and they're no longer a 14th Amendment citizen, then they have no government. Where do they go? They could technically be kicked out of the nation if they're not a 14th Amendment citizen or resident. And this, again, goes down another avenue that we're going to be discussing in the future about a lot of things that are going on with that current government that's in operation. Many of the things they've done that are actually unconstitutional. The only people that can undo that are the bloodline posterity. They are the founders. They are the bloodline, the family, the heritage of the founders of the nation. And only they can lawfully fill the seats of the original constitutional Republic of the United States of America, which is another issue I've discussed in recent videos, where the Republic for the United States of America, with people like, their alleged, interim president James Geiger and James Carpenter out in Colorado, both of whom I'm very intimately familiar with, had numerous conversations with James, and others, Joseph Gibson, who was running their show on Blog Talk Radio for 10 years. We've pointed out to them that they made many mistakes along the way. They were trying to tell governors that are in a federal territorial plane that has every right to be there to step down when they can't do that. That was one of their big initial mistakes. They don't seem to have acknowledged or recognized that only, to my knowledge, I haven't heard any of them acknowledge that only bloodline posterity of the founders of this nation, which includes millions of Americans that are here today, are the only ones that have the lawful right to fill the seats of government in that. Now, many other people can be in the Republic because they can be grafted in. That there was a naturalization process that was put in place for people to even be grafted in to the Republic early on. But at the same time, they knew then that there were going to be visitors here, and that those visitors were going to be either guests or residents or visitors. And this is where a lot of conversation needs to be had to block any false new 2.0 republic being put in place, and discuss the details of what the constitutional republic really is, what it was when it was no longer operating, why it was no longer operating, what needs to be done and what can be done to get it operating again. And now we're back to, again, this vicious circle of how the New World Order, one world government people, they're trying to strategically essentially say anybody can get in that government. That's why they're going to send people here from Nigeria and China and India and South America. And because they're here in America, hey, they can join the Republic and they can fill the seats of the Republic. No, that's completely untrue, invalid, unlawful, illegal. That wouldn't work. But that's I see that very clearly as the maneuver they're trying to put forth to make that happen. The millions of Americans that are in this country today need to wake up. See, now I'm starting to get a little heated and passionate. I feel like I wish there was a way for me to yell out. In fact, to me, this opening statement I did in this video is the most important video we've done as far as I'm concerned, because the American people that are out there that are bloodline posterity, that can trace their roots back to the signers of the Declaration and the Constitution and the Treaty of Paris, that were the founders of this nation, the founders who said we secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, our blood, our families, our lineage. Those are the ones that were initially seeding the government to begin with. Those are the ones that were seeding it until it got infiltrated, hijacked, and taken over, and is now being run by this, we refer to it as the, help me somebody, because the word's just not coming to my mind. Not the de jure government, but anybody want to throw the word out? Because it's just not coming to me and it's bugging me out. Not our de jure government, but the de facto, okay? The de facto government that's currently in place. The de facto government in Washington, D.C. that is acting as a democracy, not a republic, and is a corporation, and is doing many things unconstitutional, and they're trying to block the reestablishment of the original constitutional republic. And in so doing, they are also strategically trying to put in place a 2.0 republic. Let's just ship a bunch of people in here and say they can all be in the republic. That's their objective, to utterly destroy the original group. I want my son, Josh, I want you to make a point that you made to me just the other day about what a democracy is and what a republic is, the way you described it to me, because.
Well, it's simple. A democracy is majority rule. So if it's majority rule, then you can, basically hijack a government and then control who the majority is. They're doing that now. They're allowing this country to be flooded with illegal aliens from all over the country.
Right. And I want
a democracy is majority rule. And a republic is when those in government rule, basically, like a theocracy.
Right now, you made a
So
profound
that's
point.
why they did, you know, it's a hard thing to accept, but they set this country up to be a crown republic, meaning that the state citizens, the body sovereign, would be ruling, you know? That's why
Right.
they intended it.
Right.
It's something most people aren't going to like to hear, but that's just the fact.
Right. What's interesting about that, and you mentioned this also too, Josh, is that this was to be a nation of sovereigns, not a nation of people subject to a sovereign, because we have no subjects, but we're all sovereign. The ones that founded the
And
nation.
the reason they did that was because when you took a seat, when you took a political office, now you basically vacated your sovereignty. And the reason they set it up that way is so that you did not become tyrannical and start, you know, dictating over other state citizens. You know
Beautiful.
what
That's the point I wanted you to bring out, is that the sovereigns that were here, when they took their seat in government, they gave up their sovereignty while they were in government.
Right.
Whereas
that way they couldn't infringe upon the rights of the other citizens.
exactly. Thank you. Because that's a profound point. That's the way it was running, the way it was supposed to run. Whereas now they have it in reverse. The government is the sovereign, the people are the sheeple, and the property and the franchises. So I wanted to get all that out. The America, America, alert, 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 red alert, red alert, red alert. This is the message all Americans need to hear. They need to, you know, you can call me directly, Michael, 305-910-6206. You can send me an email at taps.pma@gmail.com. You can join in on our meetings and inquire. You need to wake up and realize that your blood owns this nation if you are connected to the founders of this nation, because that's what they put on paper for ourselves and our posterity. That is lawful. Now, the people out there that want to say, oh, you're saying because I'm not related, you know, this is where Joseph Gibson, who was on many of our previous shows, and Adam, you know, was initially adamantly taking this stance too, although in the last meeting he was on, he tended to agree. And he said, oh, well, now that I heard, you know, the way that Grant explained it, yeah, it makes sense to me. Okay, great. Well, the point is, for those people that would try to say, oh, you're saying because I wasn't related, this is where you know, the first 10 videos we did, I did my best to sort through those intricacies. So really people would have to go back and listen to, you know, our previous 10 meetings, but I think we did a good job of explaining all of that and putting it into proper perspective of what all that means. You know, I'll make it the point final like this. Those same people will say, if you ask them, should any Tom, Dick, or Harry that comes over from India or China or Japan or Mexico have the same rights as the people that gave their lives and shed blood to be the owners of this nation? And they'll say, absolutely not. But yet at the same time, they're saying, hey, if we're an American and we're here in America, what are you saying? You got more rights than we do? The bottom line is it's in law, it's in writing, it's in Supreme Court rulings. Again, there's no particular Supreme Court ruling where they come out and say, only if you're a blood sovereign and you're related do you have all rights, privileges, and immunities. But a myriad of Supreme Court cases, because they had to address these issues, over time. By looking at a myriad of different Supreme Court cases, you can see where they were addressing that, where they were trying to put things in proper perspective. And there's several cases that are good examples of that. We've referenced them in numerous of our videos, because again, a 14th Amendment citizen did not have and does not have the same privileges and immunities as a state citizen who is lawfully a state citizen by privity of blood because their family, their ancestors found this nation. So, and that makes sense because again, we're back to, hey, if you purchase 20,000 acres of property, put a fence around it, put it in trust, and it's for your family, well, who's it for? It's for your family. It's not for anybody in the world. And if you start letting some people live on your land, they're visitors on your land, and they're paying you rent to be on your land, and you can kick them out anytime you want. It's your land. So the millions of Americans out there that are connected, that know they are the ones we're reaching out to. If you got questions and you're not sure, hey, pursue it. Let's find out. Let's get to the bottom of it. We can make it very clear who does not have those rights, for basically a 14th Amendment citizen. We can also make it clear who absolutely does. So if there's questions, well, you know what? It's incumbent upon you, if you're interested, to bring it up. Bring it as an issue. Bring it to the courts if you need to. Get clarity for yourself. We know who we are. We know where we stand. And we're calling out for those Americans whose family have been on this land, many of them since before the United States of America was even established as a nation. And particularly the families, the colonists, and their blood, and the founding fathers who wrote the documents on behalf of all the people in the states, who fought and died and gave everything they had to have it. Without question, they are the owners of this land, and their blood posterity. Millions of Americans in this country today who are their blood posterity are the rightful owners of this land, who have the right to take it back. And that's why they're doing everything they can to bring this full circle back to my comments about David Straight. And I was going to mention Anna von Reitz. I was going to mention, several other patriotic groups that are out there. They're all about, oh, it's a corporate government. None of them discuss the reality that there are bloodline, privity of blood people in this nation today whose parents founded this nation, and they are privy to a contract. They are privy to a will. From the founding fathers of this nation, their patriarchal grandparents who established it for themselves and them. And they are the ones who have the lawful right to sit in the seats of the government, the constitutional republic. So it seems to me that any and all patriotic movements that are out there that do not address that are psyops. Because they do not want the posterity to know who they are, because they're the ones who lawfully can walk into that Supreme Court without going into any other court. They have direct access to the Supreme Court. When they have their status rectified and they are recognized in that system as being a posterity bloodline owner of this nation, they have direct access to the Supreme Court. And they need to organize in mass so that they can take back the true constitutional republic and not allow them to implement their 2.0 fake new version of a republic for the constitutional republic of the United States of America. So having said that, again, I'm going to go ahead and try Grant one more time. Hopefully he'll answer. If he doesn't, let's let Patricia have a word. I know she has some things to share here.
Hello?
Hi. Well, this must be Grant's wife.
Yes.
Hi, it's Michael. I was surprised that you answered the phone. Oh, you know what? I called your phone. My apologies. I meant to call Grant's phone.
It's okay.
I'll hang up and call Grant's phone.
He's driving.
Oh, okay.
Till we stop, and I'll have him call you back.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you so much. And I apologize. I got your name and number next to each other. Grant and Grant Dunn's wife. All right. All right. And I'm sorry, your name again is?
Crystal.
Crystal. Okay, it's a pleasure speaking to you, Crystal. I'll put that on my phone. Thank you, Crystal. I appreciate that. We'll wait for his call. Bye-bye. I called the wrong number. All right. So she said she'll have him call us back, but raise hand if you're ready to say something or you want to say something. Let's go with that. I was going to let Patricia go, but let's go with the raise of hand. Patricia, if you raise your hand first, it means you want to talk first.
I don't know how to raise my hand.
You don't? Okay. Well, Patricia,
I'm sorry.
go ahead then. You go ahead with whatever thoughts you have that you want to share. And,
okay. First of all, I want to compliment you on that wonderful opening statement. That was masterful with your son Josh's additions. And I thank you for that. I was here 2 weeks ago on the 1st, and there was some things brought up at that time. And so I did further research, and I think it was last Thursday, I texted you some articles that spoke specifically to some of those items. And I'd love to bring some of that up today for clarification purposes and additional information for folks to consider. So, one of the things was, and this was speaking to what Grant had brought up regarding, let's see, let me just double check here. Oh my. He was talking about treaties and that sort of thing. And then sovereignty obviously is a big issue. So I'm thinking those two articles might be the most important for us to pull some excerpts from. Okay. So the first one is, yeah, here we are. This is an international public notice, SG statements, and the restored American Republic in quotation marks. This was done very recently, and I'm just going to pull out a few things. This is a broad, there is a broad spectrum misunderstanding alive and well in the patriot movement and in the general public. We speak of the idea that the Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783, was the, in quotation marks, peace treaty ending the War of Independence. The Treaty of Paris was only one piece of the peace process, and it happened to be the portion settling our issues with Britain. It is a sea treaty and part of the Paris Treaty series. Of far more importance to us, the Americans, is the Treaty of Versailles Treaty series, which concerns land and soil ownership. The peace process ending the War of Independence was multilateral and involved numerous treaties entered into diverse treaty series. The treaties of Versailles cover land and soil. The treaties of Paris concern water, maritime commerce, and admiralty affairs. The treaties of Westminster involve specific alliances in maritime commerce. The treaties of Ghent involve commercial alliances on land, and so on. I'm going to skip now. So that was a clarification on the treaties. There's more in this article, and I can give you a reference to it shortly, but I'd like to go ahead and skip to on sovereignty.
Yeah, if you could hold that
I'll
thought.
let her finish
Oh,
her
you want,
thought
okay,
first.
because my son wanted to interject the thought, but he says go ahead and finish first.
Okay, this is from On Sovereignty, and this is an older article of Anna's, and it's very significant to what you folks want to do and what we all want to do. I recently brought attention to many excerpts from the United States Supreme Court concerning the topic of sovereignty, which we published more than 8 years ago in You Know Something's Wrong When, an American Affidavit of Probable Cause. That's the name of the book. And she calls it their comic book. These quotes about sovereignty from the United States Supreme Court were selected to provide you with the definition of sovereignty, key cases that demonstrated the exercise of sovereignty, and what you are owed in terms of sovereignty as an American. This is a horse's mouth testimony from expert witnesses about the meaning, nature, and operation of sovereignty in this country. But if you would rather believe uneducated pundits, that's up to you. Besides drawing your attention to the Supreme Court definitions and prior decisions, we wish to clear up some additional rife misconceptions about the topic of sovereignty. Your sovereignty does not depend upon nor issue from any constitution or institution. It is a gift to you from nature and nature's God, part of your unalienable character. We have noted elsewhere, however, that the world created by mankind is a separate and lesser creation than the earth. It should not surprise anyone that the sovereignty that is built into you by nature is a different kind of sovereignty than the quagmire of sovereigns, kings and queens and potentates created by mankind. Yet, even in this lesser and undesirable worldly creation, we nonetheless have our capital S sovereignty intact. This form of sovereignty that is created by men derives its power from institutions that are also created by men. This worldly version of sovereignty related to this country was won by the force of arms when we won the War of Independence. And it was settled upon this nation by William Belcher, a colonel in the Continental Army. William Belcher was the Bellicher of his generation, a clan chief born and raised in this country. He inherited sovereignty in his own right in England as a result of the Norman settlement, which granted each of the Norman barons sovereignty in their own right and their own kingdom in England. The Norman barons and their progeny were and are the rightful rulers of England and the donors to the 1689 trust. If King John's progeny messed things up, the progeny of the Norman barons are enabled and required to dissolve the trust, creating Great Britain. Skipping. When the time came for the same circumstance to present itself in America, William Belcher stepped forward and bequeathed sovereignty in their own right to every American who fought in the War of Independence and to every American who would be born on our land and soil forever after. As in England nearly 700 years before, the victory by force of arms here had the same effect as the settlement of the Norman conquest. Only here, every man was made a king, and every plot of land a kingdom, not just a fistful of barons. It was the exact same circumstance as the Norman conquest, and William Belcher quickly ascertained that he was in possession of the victory, and like his own ancestral benefactor, he was enabled to, quote, share sovereignty, unquote. So he did. George III's sovereignty was forever alienated and displaced by the sovereignty of William of Normandy and his heirs in England, the Bellichers. The only scrap left for George III was a territorial trusteeship on the high seas and navigable inland waterways, and a 10% tribute interest in any gold that was mined. I'm going to stop there. There's more to the article.
Is that a Supreme Court?
Josh is asking what you're reading from.
I'm reading from an article on sovereignty by Anna von Reitz, and it is article number 4271 on
Yeah,
the website.
Well, that's where we're having a disconnect. you know, there's all types of opinions, there's all types of books, there's all types of novels out there written by different people about who and what sovereignty is. We get that. Everybody has different ideas about who is sovereign and what sovereignty is. But where we're coming from is a place of law. We're coming from a stance from what the Supreme Court has numerously held. And that's pretty much everything that Grant is providing. Now, you mentioned, you know, treaties such as the Treaty of Ghent, the Treaty of Versailles, all great treaties, but they had nothing to do with the sovereignty that devolved upon the people through the Treaty of Paris and through the ending of the American Revolutionary War, because the people already had their sovereignty. And the Treaty of Ghent, the Treaty of Paris had nothing to do with it. Or I'm sorry, not the Treaty of Paris, the Treaty of Versailles had nothing to do with the people and the sovereignty that they gained here through the Treaty of Paris. So that's, I think, where we're having, you know, a little bit of a difference of opinion and a disconnect is where, you know, Patricia's reading from opinions, you know, based off of writings off of Annabelle and Wrights. Grant is providing you with Supreme Court rulings and what the law, you know, says about what state citizens are and who they are.
Right.
So
And
that's
I
where
think you're
I-
misunderstanding. You're not realizing the difference in jurisdiction, because the land and soil jurisdiction is entirely separate from the sea jurisdiction.
I
And,
understand that. I understand that.
and the land and soil is what we have claimed, because we are made from the same elements as the land and soil. Only men and women standing on the land and soil jurisdiction can have true sovereignty.
Right. Let me interject some thoughts here. As I'm listening to you, the best way I can kind of respond to it is, hey, beautiful. If every human being in the world can establish, can achieve any and all governments of the world, acknowledging that they're sovereigns and they have no governmental authority over them, more power to them. I applaud it. That would be great if we can do that. Another area that we're coming from, piggybacking on what my son says when he says we're going by law and Supreme Court right rulings. And let me throw this before I forget, because one of the first things I wanted to say was when as soon as you mentioned SG Anon, absolutely a controlled opposition, anti. Just the other day when we were driving back from Tennessee, I was forwarded, maybe it was from you. I received an email with a video from SG. And as I was listening to it, it was so clear to me and my son as we were listening, this guy is either AI, not really a real person, and they're having him read a script, or he's very uninformed, very misinformed, because he clearly does not understand the Treaty of Paris at all. He put the context of the founding fathers and the Treaty of Paris in that of a bunch of, kind of similar to what Adam was initially doing on our talks, as if they were asserting themselves as being the new sovereign kings that were going to have, you know, other people subject to them. And he gave a couple of examples to try to prove that that was the case, and it was very flawed. I mean, I essentially have to play it right now. We'd have a 3-hour video here, you know, conversation, because I'd be stopping him saying he's wrong there because of this, he's wrong there because of this, he's wrong, he doesn't understand this, and that's why he said that. And I could just completely dissect that 3-hour video he made. And the conclusion I had from listening to it is this guy's either controlled opposition, purposefully trying to, again, upset the particular specific direction we've been going. And it's clear why we're going the way we're going, right? I mean, we've made it clear that we're going back to the point I made with you. If every human being on the earth can say, hey, we don't have no government, and they're not going to get stopped by police officers, and they're not going to get put in jail, and they're not going to have government something to do what to do, because that's essentially what they're crying out for. That's essentially what they're saying when they say they're sovereign. They don't have a government. You don't have control over me. I'm under God. But yet 99% of those people are godless. You know, they're going out driving drunk and getting in an accident and then going into court saying, I'm a sovereign, Your Honor. You know, so this is why laws are in place, even laws regarding governing sovereignty. You know, the reason that the men who founded this nation were sovereign, they were subjects to the king. But the people that were here fought for their independence, fought for that sovereign right. Because as they said in the Declaration of Independence, you know, to paraphrase it, we hold the position that all men are created equal, right? Which again, we can digest that because clearly not all men are created equal. Some are tall, some are short, some are fast runners, some are slow, some can swim faster than others, some have a greater IQ, some are dumber, some are smarter, some are more beautiful.
Let's
Right.
not forget a very important phrase that Thomas Jefferson used in that same document when he mentioned consanguinity. So that's another important key word that people overlook. So what is consanguinity? You know, that's a whole other topic we can get into.
Well, it's a significant part of this consanguinity, which Thomas Jefferson used, and it's in the Constitution.
No, it's in the Declaration.
It's in the Declaration. There are, and as MJ, I'm sure, can elaborate on much if she wants to, you know, join in on this conversation at any point. She's very well versed on the fact that there's a certain people that created this nation. They absolutely can be linked to, traced back to the biblical Israelites, the people that were walking in accordance with God's commandments, God's laws, God's ways, God's idea for his creation. That's why in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, the books on laws, there's laws on sex, right? You don't have sex with animals. You don't have sex with your mother. You don't have sex with your sister. There's food laws. You know, God made us. He tells us if we're going to eat meats, don't eat these, but eat those, because he made us. And even Christians say, oh, that was the old laws. Jesus did away with that. I got news for you. Jesus was the man that gave those laws, because he said, before Abraham was, I am. He's the very one that gave the 10 Commandments. So he knows he created us. He knows what's good for us and what's bad for us. So for anybody to try to do away with health laws or sex laws because they're going to allege Jesus died on the cross for us and therefore we don't have these laws anymore. But yet if you tell them, oh, that means I can go murder. Oh, no, of course not. I can go commit adultery. Oh, no, of course not. Oh, I can lie. No, of course not. Obviously, the laws are in place to govern a certain people who choose to walk in accordance with the way the Creator God Almighty intended for his creation. Because the Creator God Almighty created his creation where we have free will, so he knew that there were going to be those that are going to choose to do all kinds of abominable things, and out of his graces, out of his acceptance, detestable unto the Maker, and those that are going to choose to walk in accordance, to say, you know, here I am, take me, cleanse me, purify me, make me right, enable me to walk in your ways, O Lord. You know, which again, let's just, you know, leave that at that. I don't want to go down a whole religious conversation, but there's an element to that involved with this. It's the people who founded this nation can in fact be traced back to the biblical Israelites. They were the ones that went up through the Caucasus Mountains, which is where the name Caucasian comes from, went down and populated all of Europe, which Europa means white face. They were the ones that came over and established this nation. And this was a godly nation from the outset, but it's been infiltrated, hijacked, and perverted. So there's a very specific people that created it. And that very specific people are the ones that God put in place to begin with to tend the garden. If you want to go all the way back to Genesis, he put a people here to say, because God created all things. God created all the races. God created all the tribes. God created all the animals. God created everything. But he put his people here. In fact, his people are direct descendants of him. Because if you want to get right down to it, and you trace back the lineage of Jesus, it goes back to who was a son of, who was a son of, who was a son of, who was a son of Adam, who was the son of God. So that's not the case for every created being. They're not all literally bloodline sons of God. There are those on this earth that are literally bloodline sons of God. Now, when we say God, we can get into a whole nother conversation about what that means, because there's Elohim and there's Jehovah, there's the Godhead.
Jesus refers to himself as the kinsman.
Jesus refers to himself as the kinsman redeemer. He said, I come not but for the lost sheep of Israel. Israel, not that little piece of land over there they call Israel, which has nothing to do with the biblical Israel, but the children of Jacob Israel, Jacob, who God changed his name to Israel. Those were the peoples that were endeavoring to walk in harmony with the Maker's ways, and they were to go about the world and spread that knowledge, to spread God's health laws and sex laws and 10 commandment laws and how to live right. That was their duty. That was their mission. And by and large, that was the case. Because you can look at history, and it was the white European Christians, Anglo-Saxons, that were the ones that were spreading Christianity around the world even. But even Christianity has been infiltrated and hijacked and perverted. Jesus told us that when he pointed out that, the Sadducees and the scribes and the Pharisees, who were imposters and murderers and thieves and liars. So there's a battle of bloodlines. But what we're saying is that for the bloodlines that are in accordance with law, because again, any human being out there can make that Anna von Reitz articulate, little opinionated, assertion or essay on, what sovereignty is. Sure, anybody could say, I'm a human, I'm made of the soil, I'm from God, but yet again, 90% of them are going to go out and get drunk, kill somebody, and say they're a sovereign. All right. What was it that, that was said about this nation being made by a godly people for a godly people, and if you can keep it? And we know that the enemy has infiltrated the camp and destroyed it from within, going back to my earlier little opening statement. It's been perverted. How many people even care about that? The ones that do care about it are now going to be subject to law themselves. Law even dictates who a sovereign is in this world, because even borrowing from what Anna von Reitz said, it's true. There's law, governments are made by man, right? When we're in this world, in the flesh, living in this world, there are governments. This goes back to an earlier conversation that we had early on when we first started doing these meetings. People can go out there in their Birkenstocks and flip-flops and try to travel the world and say, I'm a sovereign, but I guarantee you when they go into different nations, they're going to be subject to different rules and laws and procedures, and they're going to end up in jail in one nation for one reason and end up in jail in another nation for another reason, and so on and so forth. So there's clearly laws, and then, courts that are put in place to moderate that. Okay, what is right? There are things that need to be adjudicated still, which is what Grant and me and my son are spearheading an effort to get done. There are things that need to be accomplished. One of the things that when I get into these deeper conversations, even with some of the brightest minds I've met over the last few years, they all come back to agreeing that ultimately there needs to be a de facto government. That de facto government is there for all those people that cannot govern themselves, because the republic was for a people who can govern themselves. A sovereign is self-governing. So a person can't just claim sovereignty and not live right. They can claim it, but are they a sovereign? Are they a sovereign by law? And this is the point my son's making, that what we've done, by and large, the help of Grant, who's been looking at this angle on it for decades now, he sees clearly where all these patriot movements have been missing, is if you're in the law, because we're all subject to that, if you're having to operate based on law and treaties and contracts and agreements, it can clearly be shown that the only reason this nation even exists is because of a certain people who gave their farms, their blood, their family, their lives, their everything to establish a godly, independent, sovereign nation, a nation of sovereigns with no subjects. And they fought and starved and hungered and bled and died, many of them, to establish it. And because they achieved it and they won the American Revolutionary War, they said, now, because we've had our colonies here, now that we've won, now in order to make a more perfect union, we secure the blessings of liberty unto ourselves and our posterity. We're locking it in for us in our blood. There's law there. There's privity of blood is law itself. There's laws that govern that. So for there to be a particular people, we know for sure that there are people who can lawfully make that stand and say, we are the owners of this land and we can take back control of that corrupt government and do something about it. But not anybody can. That's the only place we're coming from. We're not trying to deny anybody else their sovereignty. If the whole world wants to be sovereign, it's more power to them. Let them be. And if they can prove it, and if they can establish that in the courts, or if they can establish that with a war, let them do it. But we know that our forefathers did. Our blood did. And they established it for us, just as they established it for themselves. So we want to move forward. We want to gather as many of those people as we can so that we can get a mass of us to be able to bring a myriad of issues before the Supreme Court to get some things rectified. And that's the bottom line on where we're coming from with it. I yield if anybody else wants to say a word. Hey, Clinton, good to see you, brother, in North Carolina. Thanks for joining in tonight. And MJ, again, is with us from Colorado. Patricia out of Colorado. Patricia, you're in Colorado like MJ, right? You're both in?
No, I'm on Nevada.
Oh, you're in Nevada, right? Okay. MJ's Colorado. Tave's out in Ohio. So I guess you heard the conversation earlier I called Grant's wife by accident. She said she'd have him call, but I guess he was out on the road. I'll ask him to listen to this. He'll listen, and maybe next week he'll come on and address his thoughts concerning it. But
I'd like to add something else here.
sure.
Again, continuing, every Continental Army soldier and Navy sailor and everyone born in this country ever since the War of Independence ended already has their sovereignty, first from nature and nature's God, and second, ultimately, from William of Normandy. That's how far back it goes. Now, this next section is quite interesting. Just as the Clan MacGregor has a clan chieftain known as the MacGregor, the Belchers, aka Belishers, have a clan chieftain known as the Belisher. Unlike the Scots clans, however, that submitted to the rule of King John and his heirs,
I have to
the
interject, Patricia.
the French clan Belisher never did any such thing. King
I need to
John was
interject.
one of theirs.
I need to interject before you go on because I know you're reading
Sure.
from a script. A thought occurred to me. You're making the claim that give me his name again. You're making the claim that anybody that's in America, if they were born in America because of Prince John William, what was his name?
Belishare.
Belisher?
Yes.
Right. So you're making the claim that some man named Prince Belisher.
No, he was a clan chieftain, William
Okay.
Belcher. That was the Americanized version.
Okay, so you're making the claim that this individual man, because he proclaimed out of his mouth, in his opinion, in his will, and his desire, that anybody who's born on this land is therefore sovereign, not subject to any government.
That was not all. He used his coat of arms, which our country coat of arms is,
Wait, hold on.
because he was sovereign
Okay,
and he
hold on.
could do that.
Okay, all right. So again, you're saying that this. I want to get it right in my head, so forgive me. I just want to get it right.
Oh, no, I appreciate it.
Give me his name one more time. I got a plan.
Colonel William Belcher. He was a
Colonel
colonel
William
in the War of
Belcher.
Independence.
He was not sovereign, just like Grant said. You know, our family came here from the Netherlands in 1632
With a coat of
with a
arms.
coat of arms granted by William of Orange, who was the Dutch king, because we were given that status in the Netherlands. 100 years later, our direct ancestor was also a colonel in the Revolutionary War, Goose Van Schuyt. You can look them up. Our family had a coat of arms. They were the oldest family in New York. And I'm telling you, they were not sovereign. They were still subjects of the King of the Netherlands. And they became subjects of the King of England after New Netherland became a British colony from about 1652 to 1776. It was a British colony. It was no longer New Netherland. It became New York because the British conquered it, and they were all subjects under that king. And it wasn't until the War of Independence that they gained their sovereignty through the Treaty of Paris. So I'm telling you, there wasn't anybody here on this land, Mr. Belcher included, that was a sovereign. They were all subjects of King George. That's a fact.
You missed the connection there. That the Belishers were equivalent to George III, and actually greater, because of going back to the Norman settlement. So it goes back much further. Now, always,
Hold that thought, because what I was getting at, I think my son made a good point there, because we also go back to 1633 with the coat of arms, and we were part of the West, the East. That
Our family was part of the colonial elite, but they were still subjects.
Right.
Like
In fact,
everybody else. George Washington was a subject.
right. In fact, I mentioned in early of our meetings that there's a mansion that our family built in New York in Cohoes. It's called the Van Scoik Mansion. And all of the founding fathers, Ben Franklin, Hamilton, Jefferson, Washington, they were all in that house. They literally planned the Battle of Saratoga in that house that my blood built. And that was the turning point in the Revolutionary War that even
And this isn't a brag. This is to make a
right.
point
It's
that
not to brag or
a
anything. It's just
family from Holland by the name of Van Scoik, who were considered elite in Holland, came here. They're part of the colonial elite family in America, but they were still subjects, just like everybody else. And nobody here was a sovereign until they gained their independence and the Treaty of Paris was ratified. And that's what gave those people equal footing with King George. And it passed down to their posterity. And people that come from that bloodline are grafted into that sovereignty by way of birthright and by bloodline. And none of those men and women were sovereign. None of those men were sovereign until that signing of that Treaty of Paris. None of them. Doesn't matter how influential they were, or what status they had, or how elite they were subjects of the king. Now Belcher
and I was going to say, even if that were true, even if he's somehow an exception somehow, number one, where's the documented proof of that, like the Treaty of Paris, showing that he was recognized?
it's not the Treaty of Paris. It's the Treaty of Versailles.
I'm saying, right,
the
that's what
Treaty
I'm
of
saying.
Versailles was a
Right.
World War I treaty,
Right.
No.
which doesn't have any relevance on. Is there another Treaty of Versailles?
Yes.
Because the
This
Treaty
is
of
what you're
Versailles.
missing.
All right, wait, hold on.
The only Treaty of Versailles I know,
right? The only
Treaty of Versailles that was signed over in Europe with the Allied troops.
Right.
There is no other Treaty of Versailles.
Right, and this will be interesting as we unravel this.
That's why,
see where that goes.
I read these groups, and I'm going to put my last thought up. I read these groups, these anti-voting rights movements, and especially the Republic for the United States, throwing all these treaties out there, like the Treaty of Ghent, and what's the one they like to quote all the time, Joseph
Northwest
Smith,
Ordinance.
Northwest Ordinance. Okay, so what? They have absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the sovereignty that devolved upon the people upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris.
Exactly. And
Versailles, unless there's another one, which I'm not familiar with.
Right. So
it had nothing to do
with
the rights that devolved upon the people and the soil that they inherited upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris.
Right. So we'll go down that road.
Grant mentioned that case law. I forget the name of the case, Hunter versus Lacey, when the Supreme Court justice, was talking about how title can only be passed from a sovereign to sovereign.
Right. So I'll allow it to go down that road, because again, we need to flesh everything out here, but it'll be interesting to see, because she's saying there's another Treaty of Versailles. I know. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, and I'll let her, and we'll see what we can do to validate it. But my point is, even if I'm making an assumption that even if that was true, even if this man was somehow some sovereign above kings of kings, and he was a great man who made that declaration, where is in relationship to governments, in relationship to other sovereign nations, in relationship to the U.S. government, where is the authoritative proof or the authority that's going to be viewed as an acceptable reality to that?
And the last thing I'll say is, where does his sovereignty come from? Because I can tell you where it's very evident where King Charles's sovereignty comes from. He inherited that because he's an heir through King George. But where does that come from? A lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but probably comes from God himself. I mean, does the Bible not say explicitly that God appoints the kings and judges over this earth? And people in the not so distant past have pretty much traced, King Charles's house to King David of the Bible. So
Yeah,
I think
the
I
evidence.
think I think it's already clear where King Charles's sovereignty comes from. So where did this man King Belcher get or Belcher gain his sovereignty? Where is that articulated, and where did his authority derive from?
It comes from, listen to the actual reference to us, found in the Treaty of Paris, issued in 1783, is a grudging mention of our nation states by King George himself, which he called, quote, the free, sovereign, and independent states, unquote. And then gleefully called himself the Prince of the United States of America. That's got an incorporated after it in parentheses. So this is where your problem is, right there. Because
Sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, what you just said to me, wait a minute. Yeah, what you just said to me sounded to me like now you're wanting to reference the Treaty of Paris. And
well, I'm saying what King George said in that treaty.
right, but
where
even what you referenced
we
from it,
are referenced the free, sovereign, and independent states. And that's the
right,
only thing that has anything to do with Americans.
but that's what I'm talking about. The fact that you're even referencing it is going right back to the stance we've been holding from the
Right.
beginning.
The free, sovereign, and independent states, there is no distinction between the people and their state, right? Downs versus Penhollow versus Dones. So
Right.
that's why, we go back to Marbury versus Madison. Well, who are the people? Who are the states? Well, it was those individuals prior to 1808, at the end of the Naturalization Act and Article 1 of the Constitution, who are those people? And that's why that justice in Marbury or Minor versus Happersett articulated that so beautifully, that those people that were here prior to 1808, those descendants of those revolutionists, they are the people, they are the states that are mentioned in the Treaty of Paris.
Which is lockstep sync with common sense, because 1808 would put the men who were in their 30s and 40s during, the 1770s, 1780s, into their death years. You know what I mean? So they were looking to protect themselves and their posterity. So that date is consistent with, hey, we're going to be out of here by then, but our posterity thereafter is by privity of blood and inheriting the same sovereignty that was granted to them by King George. So that's where there's the legal nexus that is unquestionable. So as all we're saying again is that is unquestionable. That's foolproof. That's what we're trying to wake up all the American people that can connect to that nexus so that they can be a part of an effort to undo the current corrupt, out of control federal territorial plane that everybody's so upset about to begin with.
That is the goal of
Right.
all of us.
Right.
Now, the American government was forged under the unanimous Declaration of Independence, published July 4th, 1776. The three instrumentalities of this government were all formed during the War of Independence. So you have original jurisdiction and you have opposed to delegated jurisdiction. So the government's formation is different than most people understand, because there's a difference between American government and American history and United States government and United States history. They stopped teaching American government and American history in the 1960s. So people don't know their history and they don't know about their government. So these are very significant issues.
Yes, they are.
A sovereign government cannot be incorporated into or by or through any other sovereign government. See, we have a federal capital, quote unquote, in Washington, D.C., and we have a national capital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because we have two governments in this country, one operating under sovereign powers and one operating under delegated powers. Now, they've gotten way out of line with those delegated powers because those are defined by the 3 constitutions, not 1, but 3. So there's a lot more to this than most Americans even know about. And that's the point. So, like I say, there's more to it. Now, you also made a point about what is superior about Belashare, and there's nothing superior. The sovereignty that was granted was because he had sovereignty from his lineage, and that passed down. And his family seal is what is our American seal. That's it. If we didn't have that granted sovereignty from him, what would we have?
Well, honestly,
That's the symbol right
yeah,
there.
honestly,
The seal.
the impression I get is knowing, holding the position I hold with regards to Anna von rights, as being, again, all roads lead to Rome. The number one thing that they definitely want to do is not let Americans who are by law and blood sovereign, because anybody can claim they're sovereign under God, that's fine. But the ones who are by blood, lineage, and treaty and contract and law sovereign by privity of blood, they're the ones that have the power, and they don't want them to know that. So it sounds, everything you're saying is almost like a created
And it
narrative
makes sense
put
to me
forth.
too, because if his seal, which bears an eagle, is his true family seal, then that connects him with the Vatican as well. Because if you read, I've done a lot of study.
No, it doesn't.
I've done a lot of study on coats of arms, and coats of arms that bear an eagle on them have direct connections to Rome, and I can prove it to you. So that's another watch out situation in my personal opinion, because I know
Well,
that
you're
crests that
welcome to
bear
your
an
opinion.
eagle on them have direct links to Rome.
Well, he's saying his opinion. I think he shouldn't have even said opinion,
But that's not
Josh.
even an opinion.
Right, it's not an opinion. So he just lost his words there. So I want to clarify that because she jumped on you saying it's your opinion. No, it's his comprehension based on, like you said, an enormous amount of research. And I know he does because I see my son up burning the midnight oil for weeks at a time. Like I don't know how he does it. The light doesn't go off. He's up at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, and he goes through books and research in just about every topic. I don't know how he does it, to be honest, but it's amazing. But he does. So when he says that, it's because first of all, he's discovered everything there is to know about our arms. He's communicating with people in the Netherlands and in England right now via email on our behalf, let alone everything that
It's not easy to get a seal. Once you have once your family is designated a coat of arms, it's very difficult to use the right. You have to be direct male descendant of the patriarch who received it. So I've contacted The Hague and the Geneva Convention to try to get the right to use ours, because that's the one who issued it. And you can read about Donald Trump and how long he had to fight. You go to Mar-a-Lago, he's got his crest right there. It's a big golden crest right at the driveway. You go to some of his businesses, he's got a big crest there. But if you read about how Donald Trump had to get access to that crest, it was a battle. He had to fight, because a seal is an indication of somebody's sovereignty. That individual that was issued that seal by the sovereign was deemed, I guess to a lesser degree, to be a sovereign himself. So yeah, there's a lot of significance when it comes to seals.
Yeah.
However, those seals, because I was reading about the history of seals, that an eagle on a crest is associated with the Vatican. And I'll pull up that article here in just a minute and I'll read it to you.
I just want to
Continue on while
I want to have just kind of a little bit of fluff fun with this conversation, because what's interesting about this, I keep coming back right to trying to point out that there's the reality of anybody can say whatever they want and claim sovereignty. And if you can get it, great, more power to you. But we're talking about law and contracts and privity of blood. And there are bloodlines and lineage that have lawful standing and lawful rights because of their bloodline. And guess what? Is there going to be people that don't like that? Yeah. But yet at the same time,
what did MJ say?
hold on. At the same time, aren't they all subject to it? Yes, you see it everywhere. You see it in every nation. The people are subject to the governing authorities in their land, whether it's in England or Holland or Spain or Germany or here in the USA. And it just
Excuse me.
happens.
Codes, statutes, ordinances, regulations are not law that applies to the
No,
people.
they are the law. They are the king's laws. Because
But we're not under the king.
if you're a
That's the
14th Amendment
point.
citizen, you are. If you're a 14th
No,
Amendment
I'm not a
citizen,
citizen. I'm
if you're an
not a
American, if you're an
U.S.
American,
citizen.
let me let me say if
No,
you're an
I've
American,
expatriated from that.
Even if you consider yourself to be a national, you're still under the federal territorial jurisdiction because it was the US code that created through an act of Congress what a national is. Therefore, sorry to tell you, you're still subject to their jurisdiction because that was
No,
something.
I'm not.
A national is not something that is mentioned in the Constitution.
The constitutions are for our federal employees. They're not for we, the people. We
Right.
are not under those. They are. That's
Right,
the
but that's
point.
Well, if
that's the point
you're a
Josh is trying to
national-
make.
If you're a national, you are still under the jurisdiction.
What he's saying is that the codes and the statutes, as we refer to them, right? We do know that that government over there in Washington, D.C. is owned by the crown. And we do
Oh,
know
yes.
and we do know that the crown has subjects. And it just so happens that his subjects over here, they're called Americans and they're called 14th Amendment citizens or U.S. citizens. And just because somebody calls himself an American doesn't make them immune from being a subject
No.
of that crown. And it doesn't make them, or even if they go the route of saying they're a national, because a national was a tricky, deceptive way that they used in their terminology to make a person feel that they are separating themselves while simultaneously keeping them in that jurisdiction. Because a national is in their titles, it's in their codes. So the only, aside from, again, a person just wanting to make their claim that they're a sovereign because they believe in God and they're of the soil, again, more power to them. We're just simply saying that by way of law and bloodline and treaties, for those who there's no question about it, they need to start
In fact, the very term
organizing.
national,
And the ones that
the very
can't
definition
should
of
be on our side, frankly.
The very definition of national itself is, all the property which belongs to the state. It's comprehended under the name of
Yes.
Well,
Nation states.
The state that it's talking about is the state that's found under 28 USC subsections 81 through 141.
Right.
Federal territorial state. That's what it's talking.
And that's a big thing, Patricia, that most people don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you've caught that yet or not. We've discussed it a few times, but this is something Alex is, trying to wrap her head around for the last few weeks. I think she's getting it. I hope so. The fact that when we talk about a state, there's two states. There's
more than two.
Well, there's the
Go ahead.
There, right. I mean, there's a state of being, there's a state of presence.
Lots of states.
More
Right.
power to them.
But and I'm talking about in terms of there being the state as in the sovereign, we the people. And people have to remember, again, this is part of their psyop. We the people. They're trying to give this impression that means anybody who is an American. We the people. No, who wrote We the People? The people that founded the nation wrote We the People. Guess what?
Yes.
We the people are dead. They died a long time ago. But they preserved for themselves
Posterity.
and their bloodline posterity, exactly. And that state,
That's all.
if we're referencing that state, which goes back to the Supreme Court case that Josh was referencing earlier on 1808, how they knew without question anybody prior to 1808 was a state citizen, and those are the same states that the Supreme Court ruled the sovereignty devolved upon the people and by their posterity as well. That's the nexus that is in accordance with law, that there's no question, and that has not yet been put forth. It's like Grant says, it's been a long time since the people have been in the Supreme Court. It's been a long time since a true bloodline state citizen who's trying to make a stand on what was rightfully theirs and so that they can assert their authority and their power because they are above, they are at the
And
top.
yeah.
And that government that they created is beneath them. But that
Correct,
same
correct.
government that's beneath them is actually above all these people that are claiming to be Americans and patriots that
Or
are
even a
14th
national.
Amendment citizens and even
Because they
national.
don't know who they are.
Well,
Yes,
again, know who they are becomes a little bit
And even a
obscure and subjective because again, people can, do the walk around with, Birkenstocks and a backpack and I'm a sovereign, walk across the world and I know who I am. But yet I got arrested in Germany for this and I got arrested in Spain for that. I mean, what is a sovereign? There's a lawful aspect to it.
self-governing.
That's a big part of it, self-governing.
Yes,
And that's why I think that in the Republic, that's why early on, I'm going to get right to you, Alex. Early on, it was made clear that the Europeans that wanted to come over here and be a part of this new constitutional republic had to prove themselves. They had to prove themselves being of sober and sound mind and a good person, good character
yes.
for a period of years. And they were of a particular people. Go ahead, Alex.
Um, uh, so since you mentioned me, I thought I'm gonna jump in, although
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
still trying to fix my blue screen. Well, two things. First of all, in regards to what Patricia said, and I'm just gonna put this out, and then I'm gonna continue to talk about the Title 28, Section 81 through 131 states. But to get to the bottom of what Patricia said regarding the Treaty of Versailles, wouldn't it be just the simplest thing to just look at the treaty that she's referencing, which apparently is not the one from 19 whatever 40s, but another one, and then you guys just look at that treaty, look at the language, and then
Right.
you go from there.
Right,
Um,
absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
there's
So
series. There's treaty series.
yeah, let me
So-
let me just make my point regarding the states. That's why I said like I just want to put this out here and then
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna make my point because just not to like go and like left and right and so yeah, regarding what you said, Mike, that I've been trying to wrap my head around. Yes, and that is only so I've been trying to wrap my head around how the states that are referenced by name without the state of, but just like Alabama and not state of Alabama in 28 USC 81 through 131, or I don't know, 141, Josh? I thought it was 131. The reason there is still like why it's not clear to me is because the language doesn't create them. And if the language would say there shall be a state of California and it shall be divided into 4 districts of these federal district courts, whatever.
Right. I
But
understand your concern on this language not creating them, but the jurisdiction is what created them.
that I don't understand. How can so
The
the
jurisdiction that created them was the federal territorial plane with their codes.
oh, hold on. Then okay, then you're saying okay, because my understanding was that the states of the federal territorial plane are created in Title 28 in those sections. But you're saying something slightly different.
The mere fact that they created Title 28 and started referencing states,
Yeah.
they created it.
Yeah, those US codes.
The Republic did not
every
create
one,
that.
Every one of those US codes.
Exactly.
Every one
And
of
then
those US
if
codes is an act of Congress.
yeah, but if
Yeah,
that is
as
so,
Josh just said, every one of those codes is an act of Congress in that federal territorial plane, not in the Republic.
Exactly.
okay. And then okay, but then where is the evidence that says that every one of those states is created in the federal territorial plane? Like how do you prove I would love to make this claim, but I wouldn't know how to prove it. I don't
Well,
see
that's
hard
where,
facts.
again, Grant talks about the New Deal with FDR, right? We're going to replace reality with the appearance of reality, right? There was a process. One has to be aware of the process that took place.
Well,
It's
it
not
tells
like,
it tells you right there in the code though, judicial district. You know, when it talks about the state, it talks about the different time zones and the different, judicial districts. Well, it tells you right there that that's a state that exists over there in that plane. And that's why,
How
like
does
you were talking about, Grant, you got to combine all these things and then it begins to make sense to you. But it has to do with,
yeah, like with the times, that's more clear to me because if you look up the definition for state in this chapter that talks about time zones, yes, it specifically doesn't say the several states. It actually just says territories and possessions. So that's very clear. But with
yeah, but
the
that's all they have control over is the territories and the possessions.
Exactly.
Because that's all they were given.
Hmm.
yeah, I agree. That is
So
also
if you
true.
agree, think about it then. If you agree with that, if
Yeah,
all they
yeah,
were given was the
yeah.
territorial possessions, then what business do they have in the States?
They don't.
The I guess yeah, that's the question. I mean, I agree. Like I'm in agreement with kind of yeah, they don't have possession of the states, but I couldn't make the claim myself that
It's hard.
Alabama
Yeah, it's hard.
is the
It is hard to wrap your head around. How
no,
can they?
it's not hard to wrap my head around. It's hard to prove it to be true because of the lack of the specific evidence. Like with the time zones, it's much easier because you just look at the definition and the states are missing. But with those states, like for someone to say uh those federal territorial states uh or those states were created, they're actually not the republic, the union states, but they're other states of another plane. They just have the same name. And
Well, again,
again,
look at
one could argue
1746 1 and 2. Why
yeah,
would there be?
that's another thing I could add here. If you're saying, and that's what I discussed before, if you're saying that Title 28 creates the states, then I could say, well, Section 1746 of Title 28 also creates the United States of America
No,
because that's
because it's a
also in Title
reference.
28.
No, because it's a
But
reference.
okay,
They
but
were
then
not
how?
they weren't saying over in the United States of America we now have control and we're creating districts and we control the states. No, they said, by the way, if you're over there,
Yeah.
they have to acknowledge it. They're just acknowledging if you're over there, you need to, swear by 1746 1 in accordance with the laws of the United States of America. But over
So
here, you just swear by the
yeah.
United States.
But then I would make the claim again that if Alabama is created in Title 28, so is the United States of America created in Title 28. They're just in different sections. How are
Yeah,
you?
I know that Grant understands probably the same way I do. Because we understand it clearly and we see how you don't. It's like it just ain't
Yeah, but
clicking.
what is
It's just
your
not
hard
clicking.
facts? What evidence would you put in front of someone to see? We're now debating this, and I'm asking you, where's your
Well, we're
evidence?
not debating it. You're just not grasping it. And
Right. So I want to
I
see
mean,
evidence.
evidence.
Yeah,
I mean,
hard facts, factual
the
evidence.
evidence is the fact that the federal territorial plane exists and they have nothing to do with the republic.
Yeah,
The
but
republic is,
that doesn't prove that Alabama in Title 28, Section 81 is
yes, it
created
does
by.
because they created Title 28. They
Yeah, but they
created
also
that
created
Alabama.
Section 1746, which
Right, they
reference
created right
say.
to let you know that there's a distinction. They created
So how is
1746.
that different?
They
It's
created
both
17. They created 1746 1 and 2, showing you that there's a distinction.
correct.
Right?
Yeah, but uh, that's not proof. I mean, I would love
They
this
created
like
it. If that's not proof for you, then I don't know what to tell you. They created it.
because
I
it's the same, like
the
if you're
creator
saying
of a
that
thing is an owner of a thing. I don't know. You're not grasping it. I don't know why,
No,
but
because you're not providing enough evidence. So I'm saying if
well,
section 1746, 1 and 2, one references United States of America and 2 references United States.
right. See,
And then
even
you
there,
have section
even the
81,
fact that,
and
even
that
the fact,
references
Alex,
Alabama. So
Alex,
what
even the
is
fact that you think that using that would be a basis for saying they created the United States, it just makes my mind do somersaults. It's like you're not even grasping
that's what I'm
right there.
thinking about
They're just making a
81, section
distinction.
81. But
41
you're
and 4,
doing the same
right.
thing.
They created all of the statutes. That's theirs. It doesn't exist in the Republic. It exists over there. But guess what? Over there, they wanted to be sure to let you know that, hey, if you're over there in the Republic, you're 1746-1. If you're not, you're 1746-2. The fact that you can't see that is clearly being just a distinction where they're giving you your remedy, and you
Okay,
can't grasp
so
that. I don't know what to tell
all
you.
right, so let's say, okay, so by that logic, let's say 28 USC section 81. Let's say that section 81 that says Alabama is divided into whatever 2 or 3 districts. Let's
All right,
say
who
it
did
has
that?
a part
Who
1
divided?
and a part
Who
2.
divided
Now,
that into
now
3
she needs to
districts?
get out her Black's Law Dictionary and look up the definitions for those words.
Right, there
So
you
you
go.
didn't even let me finish my sentence.
Well, because you're
Again,
not getting it, so I have to stop you word by
no,
word.
I
Josh just
no,
made a good
you
point. As soon as you
exactly
read the first part of it,
no.
get your Black's Dictionary out and look up what districts are.
Districts are territorial. They're
Hold on,
their
but
stuff, not
you're not letting me make
republic.
my point. You're not letting me make my point.
Yeah, you've
So
made
again,
it
the
100
point,
times already.
no, I'm making a new point. I was just trying to make a new point. You interrupted me.
Go ahead.
So
Let's
again,
see another one.
yeah. So by your argumentation of 1746, 1 and 2, we have United States of America, we have United States. So let's say, since you're saying that this is only a reference and they give you that to make a choice. So let's say by that logic that section 81 would have a part 1 that says Alabama is divided in whatever, how many districts. And section 2 says Alabama, the state of the union, is whatever the state of the union, and you, if you want to choose that, then you choose that.
Well,
So by
first of
your
all, you weren't
logic
making a new
about
point.
17,
First of all, you
huh?
weren't making a new point. You're harping on the same issue again. You're not grasping the reality
Yeah,
of
because you're not providing
1746.
enough evidence. You
It's
made
crystal clear to me. It's crystal clear to
it's
Josh.
not
It's
to
crystal
me.
clear to
Yeah, but
Grant.
you're
It's crystal
how are
clear
you
to I
going
don't
to
know
prove
who else.
that?
I
Or
don't know. So
yeah,
the
I
fact
don't
that
know that's the
you don't see
problem.
that as a distinction, and the fact that because that's a distinction, all of a sudden that means now we have to look at some other part of a
What
statute.
distinction?
Right? A distinction is one thing. If they're having, if they have to give remedy in their codes. Do you understand? They're over there.
No,
Over
I
there.
don't understand that they have to give remedy because a lot of things they have to do and
All
they
right, let me
don't do
try
that.
this. Do you understand that
Doesn't-
they are a do you understand that they are a federal territorial plane that has nothing to do with the Republic of the United States of America?
Yes, but that's not, I'm not disputing that. I am disputing
Then
the point.
you're not disputing that, but yet you can't grasp that whatever they create has nothing to do with the Republic.
No, I'm not disputing that either.
Then
I
what
am
is your problem?
disputing
Because if they write a
that.
28
Do
US
you know
code,
exactly what I'm
if they
Mike,
write
do
a
you know
28
exactly
US
what I'm
code
disputing
and
or
they
not?
reference a state, that
Do you know,
state has
Mike?
nothing to do with the state
All
in the
right,
Republic.
Mike, tell me, what do you think I'm disputing exactly?
It's apparent that you're not grasping this idea of how the states in the Republic are different from the states in the federal territorial plane that
So
are being
you have no
referenced.
idea what I'm actually disputing.
Well, yeah, enlighten me. I guess not. Wow.
The whole time, like we've been talking for 15 minutes, we have been talking before. I tried to make it very clear what I'm questioning, and you have no idea what it is because when I just asked you, you could not repeat it. So you don't know. Okay, so again, I'm questioning how Title 28, Section 81 through 131 actually creates and the emphasis is on create the
Who
states.
who created 28? Who created it?
The same entity that created 1746, 1 and 2.
Okay.
Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that again,
So they created their own states. It's not the Republic states.
That's
yeah, and
correct.
by that logic, they also created in section 1741,
Now you're
46,
mixing
1.
apples and oranges again. You keep doing that. You keep mixing apples and oranges. That's what Grant has told you a few times. You're mixing apples and oranges. You're talking
And
about
why
states
does
that
it
were
not
created,
say,
and then you're trying to say by the same logic. That's
yeah,
not the same logic at all. That's not the same logic to say that they, in their creation, are going to let you know that if you're over there, let us know via this statute of ours, so we know you're over there.
May I?
Good.
Anything that Congress has, so-called Congress, has created, any of their codes, statutes, whatever, since the 1860s is not our Congress, not our republic Congress, because that resigned, it signed I when Lincoln was in, and he created his military government. That's the territorial, Tory keyword. Whenever you hear territorial, think Tory. Those are British subjects trying to take us over again.
yeah, and Congress also created 1746, 1.
None of it applies to us. Only 8% of all federal laws apply to Americans, those published in the Congressional Record.
Then you're saying 1746, 1 does not apply to us.
Correct. If
Well,
it's
that's
in
not my point.
Title 28, yes, that's correct. Only when those Americans are engaged in activities that are federally regulated, or when those Americans enter in federal installations, arsenals, military docks, military bases, post offices, federal court buildings, etc. All other, quote, federal laws, unquote, codes, statutes, ordinance, regulations are published on the Federal Register and apply only to federal employees and dependents, period. Our run amok employees have tried to misapply this to us.
So now we
And
have a
that's the problem.
I think, Patricia, did that help, Alex? Because that was a very good point you made, Patricia, when you said only when somebody in the Republic is dealing with them in one of their contracts.
Dealing with them. Okay, got it. Okay. All right. That would be logical within the scope of your argument. Yes. Again, the only problem I have is the language. Would all these sections 81 through 131 say there shall be California and it shall be divided into 4 districts?
Remember, districts are territorial, again, part of their slave system.
Okay, my problem is not that it says districts. My problem is that it doesn't say there shall be or there is created a state of or whatever. It doesn't have the language of creation. That is my hiccup with this. That's the only thing.
Think of it, if it helps to think of it, I don't know if you've done this yet or not, if you think of it as an overlay, when you have those clear, transparent, transparencies and you can write over it with an ink, like visualize the original Republic of the United States of America being a land mass.
Issue with that. You're not getting my point.
And now write down a bunch of zip codes that the federal
Clearly,
territorial is, and then put it on top of there, right? That's what they're talking about. Now go ahead and write California and Alabama on that clear cellophane.
Mike,
Write all
nothing
the
that you
states
just
on
said,
it.
nothing that you just said even pertains to what I just said.
That absolutely does. And the fact that
No,
you couldn't
because I
grasp
don't
how
have
it
an issue
pertains.
with overlays. I don't have an issue with seeing another plane. I just said what I have an issue with, and what you said was not in response to that specific thing.
It was exactly in response to that.
You didn't even
It was
reference
just,
it.
it was just reiterating what Patricia said. If you're dealing with them over there, so
But I'm not.
I'm trying to help you here. If you can visualize the
Yes,
plastic
but
clear
because
cellophane
you're not
with markers
responding
on it and
exactly to
lay
what
it
I'm
over the
saying.
top, that clear cellophane, that's where it's at. It's not on the map
But that's
underneath.
not an
No,
issue
I'm
that
just
I
trying to
have.
help you, Alex, because you're not grasping it it's been
Yeah, but
weeks.
Mike, you're not even responding to the actual issue. I'm not disputing what Patricia said at all,
Good.
because
Then do
she
you
made
get it
another
now?
point that I said is logical within the scope of your argument.
Within the
Within the
scope.
scope.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and then I said something else to which you didn't reply. You can listen on the recording if you're interested. You won't see you if you listen. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've tried so many times to make my point clear, but I don't know. It's not being heard.
You know, your
By you,
point,
at least.
it's not that your point's not being heard. Your point is well understood. You're just not grasping the explanation for some reason.
And tell me what you understand my point is.
Well, you've said it. Like you said, like we can play this back and I hear you say the same thing over and
Tell me,
over.
Mike. I'm pretty sure you cannot articulate my point because you probably didn't understand it. Because you're not responding to the point.
Well, and you're trying to be, combative with me for some reason, but
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to have a logical back and forth, but I'm listening to you and you're not responding to my point. Now I'm asking you, can you now repeat what my point is? Do you know what my point is?
I've heard you say it a few times. I've heard you say it a few times and you're telling me I haven't heard it. So that in itself says a lot.
Tell me what
So
it
I mean,
is.
yeah, I've heard you say it 3 or 4 times. So say it
And you,
again and I
no,
won't
I'm not
say
going to say it
nothing.
again because I've
We'll
said
see
it
if
3 or
maybe
4 times,
MJ
and
or
I've asked
Jay or
you.
Patricia can say
I've
some more.
asked you to repeat it. You couldn't repeat it. I've said it again. So I'm asking you, can you repeat it? Do you know what it is?
I don't want to play games with you, Alex. If you're trying to get me to repeat your own words, I'm sorry. I'm not going to try to
Yes,
repeat.
yes, I am, Mike, because you're not responding to the point I'm making.
Oh, I
And
am. I've responded to it
just tell
times,
me. Just tell me. What is the
Alex.
point I'm making? Just tell me. Can you or not?
You don't even
No.
know the point you're making?
No, again, tell me what you understand my point is.
All I can do is repeat what you've been saying and repeat what we've been trying to tell
Okay,
you.
do
to
it. Do it.
understand.
Repeat what I said my point was.
Yeah. You,
What is it?
in my own words, Alex, not in yours, but in my own words, you keep telling us how you don't understand because there's no clear words in 28. Even though we're telling you that government over there, that federal government created it, you don't understand why they didn't put more clear words explaining how that state that they're referencing is somehow a different state over there in their plane than it is over here in our republic.
No, Mike, that was not my point.
Wait, before you go on, Alex, does anybody else on here? Hold on,
like
Alex.
5 times now.
Hold on, Alex, because I know what you're doing with me now because we got into a personal little spat a couple weeks ago, and you're trying to put me on the spot on this call. So
No, I'm not trying to
I'm
put
going
you
to
on the
ask.
spot.
Hold on,
I'm
Alex. Hold on,
noticing,
Alex. I'm going to ask if
noticing you're not
anybody else.
replying to what
I'm
I'm
going to
saying.
ask. My son just heard me say it, and he's heard you. So now you're calling my son stupid too. You're saying he doesn't know.
I'm not calling anyone stupid.
My
I
son
didn't
just
even
heard
say
the way
that
I
word.
my son just heard the way I responded to understanding you, and he concurred that that's a good understanding of what Alex ain't getting. So I just want to ask, does anybody else on here, Dave or MJ or Patricia, think that I did a good, a reasonable job of conveying my understanding of what she has been trying to indicate about states being in the federal republic in 28, not really defining and having good enough words to be proof that those states are somehow different from states in the Republic. That seems
May I
surely
comment on
yeah,
this?
please.
Please. Bless your hearts, dear ones. There's a reason this is called code. They don't want the people to understand this. It is deliberately written to confuse you. That's very significant.
Right.
The constitutions are of importance to our federal employees, and that's the so-called government employees down to the state employee, because they're all corporate, right? Because the constitutions are their service contracts, their source of empowerment, and the law of the land they are supposed to be obeying while they're working in this country. But they haven't been. And that's what we're calling them to account about. They've
That's a
run
different
amok.
point, and I'm agreeing with you on that. It's a totally different point, but again, you're correct. So again, Mike, my
Right.
point
No,
was
no,
that
no,
the
no,
language
Patricia,
is not
Patricia, since you
creating.
came in, I had asked a question. If you want to answer that, Patricia, because like Alex said, you made a different point there. I was asking, is anybody else on there, Tave or Patricia or MJ? My son seemed to agree with me that I conveyed an understanding of what Alex seems to be confused about, but Alex says I'm missing her point. Does anybody else concur that I conveyed kind of the message that we all seem to be trying to help Alex understand? Or am I missing it in somebody else's
That wasn't even
opinion
the
as well?
question.
Well, hold on, Alex. Go ahead, MJ.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think we will probably, Patricia said two pretty profound things. First of all, this is meant to confuse. And second of all, she addressed our three subcontractors in this bottom part of the V in the Confederate. And our Confederate is called, it's defined in the Articles of Confederation, what our Confederate is called. First letter caps, the United States of America, except for of. That's our unincorporated business entity. And if you look at the Declaration of Independence, the U is small because we're talking about states of states. We're talking about business. We're talking about trade and business and commerce. We're not talking, like Patricia says, about the 1782 and then presented in 1783 January Treaty of Versailles part. Like she said, it's a series. That was the land and the soil. What you guys are referring to in that A number 1 or number 2, neither one of them are us.
Right.
I yield.
They want to trick us there.
Yeah,
That's the
one of them
point.
is United States. The other one is United States of America. Neither one of them are us.
Exactly.
You're fighting in these other two subcontractors that have nothing to do with us, that are all bogus since 1861 when Lincoln made his executive government that is bogus.
Exactly.
I yield.
Thank you, MJ. Another point. Our run amok employees have tried to misapply the vast bulk of the federal code and their municipal code to rank and file Americans via this complex, unlawful conversion of political status scheme promoted by mistakenly, quote unquote, registering American babies as federal dual citizens and conferring the foreign status of British territorial U.S. citizen and municipal, small c, citizens of the United States on them as babies in their cradles. They've used the absence of the Federal Republic as their excuse for this, but they forgot that the Federation that gave rise to the quote, federal, which means contract government, still exists and doesn't need a vendor to perform the delegated land jurisdiction services. And we've unraveled that fraud and that unlawful conversion of our birthright political status. And we've established our reversionary trust interests. And all three resulting trusts that have been named after us, the purportedly, quote, waived American estate that resulted in the creation of an American infant decedent estate named after us. That's the British territorial U.S. capital C citizen, quote, lost Seamen's Trust, also named after us, and the municipal, all caps, estate trust and derivatives named after us. So as a result, the declared and quote, returned unquote Americans were here. We're the naked owners, flat-footed, securely standing on the land and soil of our states of the Union. That's land. Union states is soil. So you have land and soil jurisdiction. So there's so much more to this. All 50 of the states of the Union have been repopulated by declared and recorded and published Americans with provenance and standing to do so. And all 50 state assemblies are in session now. We do it regularly.
Yeah, okay, let me interject at this point, because I think that I want to end the meeting at this point because I want to let Grant listen to this meeting so he can give his thoughts, because unfortunately he couldn't join in. My son also had to walk out a few minutes ago because just the last bit of information that was being provided, I have views on it that are based on my knowledge, awareness, and insights and comprehension, where I suspect there may be some error in what you were just saying, predicated solely upon what we were talking about earlier with regards to actual law, and law being that which governs in this world versus just an ethereal, one claiming to be a sovereign of any given land or territory or location. That's what I'm also trying to help give clarity to, because like I said at the outset, I'm all for every person, on planet Earth being able to say that they're a sovereign under God who does not need or have rightfully any government controlling over them. I'm all for that, while simultaneously recognizing that it's necessary, unfortunately, because of human nature. And therefore, if there are going to be governments, laws become the rule. We can't just say, hey, I'm a sovereign, and because I was born on this land, that makes me a sovereign, if it's not acknowledged in law, because law is what governs everything. That's where, to me, there may be an issue, which again goes back to our initial preface. We just do know that there are individuals in this nation that, by virtue of having had given all they had in winning the American Revolutionary War, were granted sovereignty, and the Supreme Court ruled that sovereignty devolved upon that specific people and their bloodline posterity. So we know that there's a certain group that there's no question about it. the group that you're referring to is more that kind of ethereal group that's just wanting to make the claim because they're angry or they're jealous or they're of the mindset of who do you think you are to say you have sovereignty or rights that I don't have. There is that segment. And then, of course, there is that other segment that absolutely, if there's nations and they're sovereign, do they have the right to just come over here across our borders? This is where most, quote unquote, patriotic Americans even have problems with the government letting all these quote unquote illegal aliens come across the border and infiltrate and just come over here. Even to the point of saying, what, because somebody can just come over here real quick and drop a baby on the land because they were born here, now they're an American citizen, which Trump is obviously challenging, rightfully so, because if an American goes over to Germany, if any woman is my wife and we go over to Germany or Spain or Mexico or any other land and my wife's pregnant and she just happens to have that baby over there, they're not of that birth. They are my son, an American, even though they were born over there. So why should it be any different for any other person who thinks they can just come over here and drop a baby and get an anchor baby just for the sake of trying to get the so-called privileges and benefits? And they're not entitled to immunities, as the Supreme Court has ruled. So there are clearly some distinctions, and there are essentially three classifications. As I indicated, I'll recap it. There's that which we know for certain is that it's unquestionable because they are bloodline posterity and they can prove it. There's no question for them based upon law and treaty and contract. Now there's that middle of the road. Well, wait, when you say I don't have rights too, I've been here and I was born here. Where does the law hold you? If the law holds you as a 14th Amendment citizen, and then you suddenly say, I'm going to revoke my 14th Amendment citizen, that doesn't necessarily put you in the sovereign group. That doesn't necessarily put you as an American in the Republic. That could potentially have you kicked out of the nation because the United States says, oh, you're no longer a US citizen. You have no right to be here. And then they export you. So there is that group of people. And then there's the other group of people that, again, they have no right to be here anyway. So if we're going to go back to that middle group again, and which is touting that, which I agree with, all human beings, are sovereign. God created all things, but do they have the right to just go into any other territory and claim ownership, residency, right to live, right to be on any soil anywhere on the world? Do they? Different people are going to have different views and opinions for that. But frankly, that goes hand in hand with what my pet peeve has been for the last 4 years, which I started off with. And that's a new world order, one world government corporation that they are endeavoring to achieve and obtain. And a lot of what the
Exactly.
middle of the road people are talking about, the Anna von Reich's peoples, a lot of their position is much more in line and consistent with facilitating that new world order, one world government
No,
view.
no.
Yes,
Mm-mm.
because they are saying that anybody and everybody's a sovereign and they
No,
could be anywhere and they could be
nope.
here. And
You're
because they're American, they're
misunderstanding.
sovereign. And the position is that we're all of God. And because we're all of God, we're all sovereigns. And therefore, a person should be able to be a sovereign anywhere. And if you're going to say no to that, then we're right back to square one. Then we're dealing with what does the law say about who a sovereign is. And again, there is a group of people that it's inarguable because they have privity of blood. Their blood created this nation. It's in treaty, it's in contract. So this is the conversation. And this is what I'm not trying to, I'm certainly not looking to be a sovereign over anybody else by no means.
Sovereign without subjects.
Yeah, even if they don't have sovereignty, I'm not claiming to be their sovereignty. Even if they don't have sovereignty by law, even if by law they're an American and they've been here for 2 generations, but the Supreme Court rules, no, you don't have privity of blood. You're a 14th Amendment citizen. And if you want to waive that, sure, you can call yourself a national, but you're still under our jurisdiction. And if you don't want to be under our jurisdiction, you don't have a homeland. You're a wandering vagabond. And therefore, you're going to go, out of this country to some other land where your forefathers came from, or any number of other, attacks they might want to put if they so choose, because they have that jurisdiction over this. They're claiming jurisdiction over this land, which kind of goes back a little bit to the issues that Alex was raising, whether she realizes it or not, or whether she intended to or not. The issue about that territorial plane exercising control essentially over the land. They're essentially exercising control even over sovereigns who they have no control over, even the ones that lawfully, by privity of blood, have no. But yet we believe we've come to understand and comprehend that that's actually a process that can be engaged in that will definitively assure anybody who is genuinely a bloodline posterity sovereign their proper status as such. So the others, I guess they'll just have to try to take the Anna von Reitz approach to it and say, hey, we want our passport and we want our status changed equal to these bloodline posterities. And if the State Department gives it to them, more power to them. And if the State Department doesn't, it's because of law. It becomes a law thing. Based upon, again, privity of blood and founders and bloodline and posterity and treaties and all the rest. So that's what, I'm just trying to get all of that sorted, because that's why I said, when you were talking, Patricia, and even MJ, I know she's lockstep with you because she kept giving the thumbs up. She's thinking along the same way, but I suspect there may be some issues with that. I'm not sure, because on the one hand, I'm all for everybody being a sovereign, but I'm not, because I'm not for just anybody coming over here. And just because they're born here doesn't make them a sovereign.
Exactly. It doesn't.
So
You're
yeah,
right.
it's a tough issue, and that's what I'm trying to help sort out here. But while I'm trying to do it, I beseech as many Americans as can who listen to this recording to start joining our conversation and to start researching your own bloodline past and see how tightly knit you fit into the legal scheme of being able to be a part of the actual authority of this land that actually created the government that's currently in place. But we'll let it go at that for now.
Mike, can I ask?
Michael,
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I would just encourage people to look at the two references in completion. I just took excerpts from them today.
Right.
And
Yeah, cite those for me so that we
okay,
can
that's
recommend.
at annavonrights.com. And the one was article number 5313, which is American government structure. And then number 4271 on sovereignty, which also addresses Plantagenets, Declaration of the Flag, William the Conqueror, and other issues I didn't even get to.
Right, but one of the problems, remember, Patricia, is like my son alluded to earlier, there's all kinds of people out there proffering all kinds of,
Yes.
they come up with their opinions and views and they write theses, and in many ways, many view her as just being that. She's citing her opinions and views based on things she's read that, and our opinion in some instances are not consistent with law as we comprehend it and understand it based on Supreme Court rulings and the treaty and the declaration and the preamble. It just some things that are inconsistent and that are consistent with kind of that. Again, when I say New World Order, One World Government agenda, the reason I associate it with that, because I alluded to it earlier, there's no question, it's crystal clear to me that is one of the mechanisms they're trying to use right now to create this New World Order, One World Government agenda, is essentially kind of a 2.0 version of the Republic and a 2.0 version of the concept of sovereignty itself.
Michael, I agree. And so does Anna. Listen, if you also look at the lineage treaty, which is article number 1176, and systemic indictment number 2588, you'll get further clarification. And her recent article, just done in the last 2 days, is amazing. And it's calling Trump out. He went to the world court to try to do the 2.0 you're just talking about. And we have stood in their way and prevented him from doing that with what
Now
we've
let
done.
me say, Patricia, you've given a lot of information. I don't want to overkill it. Spell out the website, annavonrights.com. Spell it out.
It's, oh, what is it? That's a good question. It's ANNAVON REITZ.com. And that, by
Okay.
the way, is her name, her pen name, if you will,
Right.
like yours is
That's right.
Michael.
Yeah. And I do want to say, just for the record, um, the first time I ever heard about Anna von Reitz, it was a very favorable view I had because of all that it appeared to me she was doing and is doing. So I will say that my first kind of coming to understand, be aware of, know about Anna von Reitz several years ago was favorable. Um, then I got to know David Lester Straight personally and intimately, and
He
he
addresses her, by the way. I mean, she addresses him as well and where his issues were.
right. So the mere fact that those two have issues began to become the basis for why I started looking at both of them. Because as you know, I even allude to
Good.
David, where he agrees with a great deal of the things we're saying, but there's several things that made me suspicious of him. Is he working for the Vatican ultimately to keep people from being aware of the posterity issue? Because that's a key issue.
It is
And
a key issue.
right. And it
Yes.
seems to me, but again, when we say posterity, I feel when you say it, you're thinking of posterity as anybody that's here that calls themselves an American, because that's the current, I believe,
It's
New
more
World Order.
complex than that.
Well, I believe that is the New World Order, One World Government 2.0 definition of posterity, is to get in the minds of people that posterity means that all these Americans that are here today, those wonderful founding fathers created this great free nation for all of us from around the world to come over here and be Americans, and we're the posterity. I believe that is a fallacy. That's the New World Order, One World Government definition of posterity. I know that to be a factual statement when I say that, given to me by the Creator Lord God Almighty on high. I know that that's exactly where they're coming from, because I
You
know we're
would get
trying.
no disagreement from myself or Anna on that.
Right. So
Now,
then the other thing is, I just wanted to add, and this actually kind of favors me back to Anna. What I will say is, Grant, if you're listening to this, I hope you listen to this, Grant. And if you got to this point, take heed, Grant, that you know Josh and I are with you 100%. We agree on everything. I would encourage you to look at the documents that were just referenced by Patricia. Be open-minded about Anna von Reitz, Grant, because I am, because I do know good people like Patricia have been involved with a long time and feel that they're doing the right thing. And just the things that she's referencing are within reason and sensible. Again, I do get a little bit of, antsy with her also being David Straight, New World Order operative, Anna von Reitz, New World Order operative. I was just going to
nope.
mention Eric Dingus. When I got to meet Eric Dingus is brilliant. Eric Dingus, I would say we became good friends. He called me like family, although he's also a guy that'll turn on me in a heartbeat if I say the wrong thing. But he is brilliant in common law, Exodus 18 model. I believe he means well as well. We just saw him in Tennessee a couple weeks ago. We went by to see him. He's got a new office up there, and he's working on a document that, just as he was reading it and we were talking, I've told this to his face, so I'll say it on this video. And if he ever hears it, he already knows this is my position. I feel very strongly, more so now than ever, that Eric Dingus, who I respect, I appreciate, I believe he's brilliant, is working for a new world order, one world government approach to a republic, like the new version of a republic. It's let's let the whole world know we're all sovereigns, we don't need government, and we're all, but yet there is still going to be a government. It's very tricky, and that government's Rome. That government is the Vatican, and they're really fooling people by making people think that the Vatican's been taken down, and no, we've got their money and we got the gold, and they don't have anything. That's all bullshit. I'll just say it flat out, Patricia. I have to say it that way because it offends me. That's another problem I have with the Anna von Reitz movement. I believe you've said it yourself. People in Anna von Reitz are making these outlandish claims that the Vatican is down. They've been taken over. They're down. They're down and out for the count. That's bullshit. They are up and running and they're using these psychological operations. And that's why I would believe Anna von Reitz is also one of their agents. Very subtle. She'll say a 99% truth and 1% error to lead people astray. That's what the devil does. The devil's in the details. So that's why I'm very cautious of her still. Again, I admitted early on I was favorable of her, But when I got to know David Straight, I was kind of on the fence about him, although he agrees with a lot of what we say. He wasn't preaching it. And sometimes I think he was also put in place to keep the true message of true posterity in the dark. Anna von Reitz keep the true message to posterity in the dark. Eric Dingus, an agent of the Vatican, a Jesuit himself, it seems to me at times. The man is brilliant. And you know,
Wow.
keep this notion of the true bloodline posterity in the dark. Don't let them know who they are, because they have the power. That's the impression I get from David, from Eric, from Anna von Reitz, and it very knowing the significance of posterity bloodline as I do, based upon the preamble and Supreme Court rulings and the Treaty of Paris. Based on those things alone, and even that SG report, it's like he is working for the Vatican. Man, make people think the Treaty of Paris is a bad thing, and they were just a bunch of people that were trying to become like the sovereign kings themselves, and they were dictating, and they were dictators, and they were trying to be rulers, really putting the founding fathers in a bad light, dividing them, divide and conquer, set the founding fathers against each other. They were drunkards, and they were whoring around, and they were godless men. Eric Dingus does that regarding the founding fathers. SG report was doing that, really trying to disintegrate and tear apart and make trivial light of the Treaty of Paris, as if it was something put in place to help this new aristocracy get in place. That's all bullshit psyop to keep the posterity from knowing who they are. Because when they rise, and that's what our effort is to get those bloodline Americans to know who they are and rise, they and they alone have the lawful authority to go directly to the Supreme Court, directly to the Secretary of State, have their status acknowledged in their system as posterity sovereigns with absolute immunity, and they can navigate and bring into the Supreme Court numerous controversies that need to be resolved. So that's where we stand with it all. But I've got
you.
an open mind. Again, I'll
Patricia.
encourage Grant to have an open mind, listen, read the documents. Go ahead,
Patricia.
Alex.
Can I ask Patricia, what is the year of the Treaty of Versailles that you were referring to?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't answer
It
that
is,
question.
I had put the link in there, but I took it out. You look at the
Oh.
first one was, it's the first part of what she was talking about was in November 30, 1772. Then the Versailles one was January 13 or something like that, 1773. So these are, this is
That
like she
sounds
said,
about
it's a
right.
group.
Yeah, that sounds
May
about
I,
right.
Thanks, MJ, for that information.
Yeah, and may I also,
Yeah.
I think the one point that's being missing here is the naturalization law, the Naturalization Act of 1790. This was from our second Congress. Our first Congress in 1774, October, said there will be no more slavery after December 1st, 1775. We got rid of slavery. Us people who have that are Americans, we got rid of slavery December 1st, 1775. And then when we did the Declaration, it was the states of states. It was commerce. It was about commerce. And the Treaty of Paris had to do with commerce. It did not have to be with living people on the land.
Yes.
No,
What
that's
had
not
to do
true.
with
That's
living
not
people-
accurate.
That is accurate. What had to do with living people on the land was the Naturalization Act of 1790. You will be white, in other words, European. You will have a good character, in other words, Protestant, not Catholic and not anything else, just protesters. And you will be here for 2 years. Then in 1794, I think they changed it to 4 years or 5 years. And then right before the turn of the century, a lot of Catholics were coming over. And so they changed it to 14 years. And then 1804, they moved it back to 5 years. And it did not change until after the melting pot play in 1913, when this group that you're talking about was trying to get us not to be white protesters from Europe. And so they wanted to redo the naturalization law in 1920. They wanted to go with the 1910 census and do 3%. Well, it was debated for 4 years. And white European Americans said no. And in 1924, we had a new naturalization. It went back to 1890, which was still all European, and it could only be 2%. And that has been our naturalization law until Johnson, after the Mossad took out Kennedy so they could put in Johnson in 1965, he abolished our Naturalization Act. And that's when everything changed. But it's all fraud. It's all
Right.
fraud.
Well,
Right.
yeah, that's
can't
true.
do
I mean,
that.
it was a process. It wasn't any one thing, obviously. I mean, FDR was probably the greater part of it. He really put it in place officially through the government.
I'm not
And
talking about that, what FDR did. We're
right,
simply
but
talking
what
about
I'm
one
saying,
thing, Michael. We're talking
yeah,
about who is an American and who is not.
right, but
Americans are
again,
European, white Europeans who are Protestant. That's what they
exactly.
are. If you look at our first Congress,
No, I know we
the
agree on that,
paragraph
MJ.
just before we stated all the things, it said free Protestant colonies.
Right. We know that, MJ, you know that's true, and I know that's true. And that's frankly one of the problems that we're facing, because the only way, going to the point I made earlier about the only people that can truly re-inhabit the republic, we'd have to go back to how the republic was operating at the time that it was, which would include that reality that only white European Protestants are going to be in that government.
Yes,
And
and that's what the book that I have from 1840.
right.
It says
So
there were 13 million of us here, and
right.
95% were Protestants.
Right.
And
So
of
as
that
you
13
know,
million, over 10 million were 3 denominations:
right.
Baptist, Methodist, and Presbyterian.
Right. And as you, I'm sure know, and you might not care. And I say that not in a bad way. There's many people that hold the position you hold, which I share, that have an, I don't, care what other people think. This is the truth. And that's great. I just happen to have a personality where not so much that I care, but I'm cognizant of the fact that there are people out there who are being browbeaten and whipped and with their tail between their legs and beaten into submission through political correctness. And oh, you're a racist, oh, you're a bigot, oh, you're intolerant, right? When the nature of this conversation gets out, it's very purposefully put in a light of that manner, right? Oh, this is a group of white supremacists talking now. Oh, they're just talking about only white European. What you're saying is the truth. That's what our nation was founded upon, and that's what an American is. But what is an American today? An American today is any Chinese, Negro, Asian, Indian that comes from anywhere in the world, and they come over here. Oh, they're an American. That's the illusion they've created. That's part and parcel to FDR's let's replace reality with the appearance of reality, because it's evolved into that, frankly, since his time unto the current day. And that's part of the battle that we're facing. So if we're truly going to reoccupy the seats of the republic, the constitutional republic for the United States of America, it has to be reseated, not in accordance with their 2.0 agenda that they're clearly trying to put in place, which this is where, again, it becomes problematic with this is where I believe the fine line of Anna von Reitz potentially being a Vatican operative comes into play. Because essentially, if we take her position completely, her approach wholeheartedly, 100%, it's going to lead us in this down that path of all Americans that are here. See, now, MJ, it's not what you said an American is. It's what the current definition of what an American is, which is anybody. LGBT, Black, Negro, Asian, Indian, whatever they are, any religion, any this, that's an American because they're here in America. That's going to be, there's no question in my mind that will be a part and parcel to the Anna von Reich's objective and goal. And it's in that regard, I believe she's a Vatican agent. She might say all kinds of other stuff that's true and accurate, but I think that's where the gotcha is. And I could be wrong. I don't think I am. Because it seems to me, knowing that that is their objective, to break down nations, to break down racial identity, and to break down gender identity, and anybody who's opposed to the breaking down of those things is a bigoted, racist, redneck, white supremacist. That's what they've done. They've labeled and shamed white European Protestant Americans into feeling that way about themselves through political correctness and browbeating, if they take the position you hold, MJ, because the one I just described is precisely the one they're trying to implement. That's the big problem we have here.
May I?
Sure, Patricia, go ahead.
I want to say that Anna did a whole series of articles that took a lot of her time and energy, where she took things to the Vatican Chancery Court. And talk about calling them out. Oh my gosh, did she? So I don't believe she's a Vatican operative. You have to read a little more to maybe
you could
find
say
that out.
that, Patricia. I mean, you could say that like you did. She could put on an act. I mean,
No act. This was all law. This was facts. None of it was rebutted, which means it stands as truth, fact, and evidence.
Well, but the fact that she even went to the Vatican.
No, you don't understand.
True American sovereigns don't answer to the Vatican. We don't
They
have
don't.
nothing to do with
That's the whole point.
But yet she's going
exactly
to them.
the point. She
But
went
yet
there
she's going.
once.
But yes, she's going to them.
No, you don't understand jurisdiction and courts and how that work. Now,
Yes, I do.
okay, fine. A couple things.
You're making, I got to say, you're making a similar kind of argument that frankly is consistent with Eric Dingus, who, man, if anybody's a Vatican agent.
No, she called him out too, believe me.
I know, and he calls her out. And to be honest with you, that even all the more makes me suspicious of both of them, because they're playing
okay, that's fine. Be suspicious.
Let's make it look like we're enemies. These people are slick, man. These people are slick. They know what they're doing.
International public notices.
Talking about they're going to throw up the international law, and they're going to come up with, the international sovereignty, and you've got to know your international laws. No, the United States of America, the people that founded it, created their own sovereign nation under God's authority, period.
Yes.
They don't have to answer to the king. They don't have to answer to the Vatican. They don't have to answer to anybody. And that's what they need to regain. And the only ones that can regain that, as MJ alluded to, are white European Christian Protestants who are in this nation, who have a bloodline direct lineage to the founding fathers. They're the only ones that can lawfully fill the seats.
Yeah, and the New World Order is not a New World Order. They're wanting to go back to the way it was. They don't like that we're sovereign. They don't like that that the people can say, you're out. You guys are screwing up in this tiny bottom part of this inverted pyramid. Right. And you got the 2/3 of it here. And because we walked out of ours, guys just need to go, because you don't belong here. Anyway, your contract's over. So leave.
That's what Anna is saying. You don't have a contract. Continued deceit and obfuscation is article number 5333, an international public notice of.
Okay. And again, I'll encourage you, Grant. Grant, if you're listening still to this, hopefully you will listen to this whole thing, Grant, and pick up what you can from it and use it to sharpen your own mind. Please research these documents that Patricia's throwing out. I've got an open mind, but again, I just kind of recited the very narrow, very subtle way that I believe she's being used as an operative of the Vatican. I wish I was wrong, but knowing what they're trying to achieve, and seeing all the different operatives they have out there and knowing who the real sovereigns are, if nothing else, that's what I got to focus on because again, I know there's no question about them. They do have the lawful standing in this nation, the United States of America, the godly nation, the godly republic that was created. Those people need to wake up and I guess, we took the time to have this video. So, God willing, God will get this, get me inspired to upload this to YouTube, and YouTube will probably take this one down, and I'll upload it to BitChute and Rumble and Odyssey, and hopefully people will share it and share it and share it, and we'll build an organization at least of true Americans. Look, again, I've said from the beginning, even Americans that consider themselves to be Americans and they believe in sovereignty and they believe in liberty and they believe in their freedom and they believe in sovereignty and they believe they're an American and they believe that they should have all the same rights and they believe that their posterity, even if they're not, they should support us because ultimately there's no question with us and we want to right the ship. Those of us who are putting forth this effort are the ones that know for a certainty there's a group of people in this nation, millions of them, who have bloodline heritage to the founders, their great grandparents who created the nation and left it in their name, were the owners of this land. And we can take back the government and we can undo all that they've done to allow this nation to be corrupted, frankly, through the corporations, because it's the corporations that are even controlling that federal territorial government. And it's the corporations that are promoting all the godless social trends, the perverted, godless, immoral movies and Hollywood television and advertising and products and self-destructive social trends and everything else. It's the corporations that are doing it, and it's the government that's allowing them to do it because they're controlling the government. So we need a godly government of the right people who are the bloodline owners of this land to take back their nation. That's the position.
Yeah, and the godly government of the Republic of the American nation is the Trinitarian worldview of Abel, and it is the government is on the shoulder of the Lord Jesus Christ. We simply governance. It's governance here, and our federal part, the instrumentality of the Federation, which was the United States of America, and that put our little federal part together with these three little sections. That's all they were supposed to do, was to protect our borders and to work on trade, trade and commerce between states and other nations. And that is what what the Republic is. It's the third Republic. The first one was in the Garden of Eden because the Republic has three things: a king, a law, and self-governance. And so the king was the triune God. The law was don't eat from the tree, and they were to self-govern. And the second republic was in the desert with the tabernacle, and the glory of God was the king there, so we could dwell among his people. And then the law was the character of God. This is who I am, the 10 Commandments. And then you had all the tribes, they had all their banners, and now they were me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And this is the third republic. America is the third republic. And we have a king who is the triune God. And we have a law, which Jesus told us what it was: unconditionally accept your creator, yourself, and others. And that doesn't mean everyone is American. And then we are to have the laws written in our hearts. And then we are to self-govern.
Right.
And
the
we are
problem
very
is
specific
they've
who we
replaced
are.
that. They've replaced that God with a fake God.
But it's all bogus. Anything
Right.
after 1861 is not American.
That's
Right.
correct.
Yeah.
Can
All right,
I
well, let's
ask
end it
a
on that.
practical question?
Yeah, Alex, I know Alex didn't finish earlier, so let me let Alex, go ahead and say whatever she's got to
I
say.
have
and
a I have a
ahead.
practical question. So
Mhm.
let's say there was a Chinese immigrant and he was residing in one of the, I don't know, signing states. I don't even know, like Pennsylvania, I think, was one of the 13 colonies, maybe. Let's say he immigrated there before. He's fully Chinese, 100%. So he's not European. So he was, and let's say he was directly related to one of the signers of the Treaty of Paris. Or I'm sorry, the Declaration of Independence, right? Or whatever. But so the example I'm making is if if the premise is that the United States of America is only European whites, how do you uh how what do you say someone like a Chinese or let's say a Chinese woman married to one of the posterity. Now they have a kid that is half
Yeah,
Chinese and
yeah,
half white.
yeah. Let me
Now
answer.
that
Let me
Chinese
answer.
marries another Chinese, so they procreate, and at the end, let's say today, that child is 10% European and 90% Chinese. Is that still a posterity or not? How do
Yeah.
you
First of all,
assess
let me
that?
say you said a practical question. That's not very practical at all because it didn't happen and it wouldn't happen to God in God's law. He says, do not mongrelize, do not mix your blood. So anybody that's in God's camp wouldn't be doing that to begin with. And it didn't happen. So you're given a hypothetical there that
Yes,
just doesn't exist.
hypothetical.
Right. A
But it could
hypothetical.
exist. It's very well
Well, no,
possible.
actually, in God's law, it wouldn't exist. God said, because one of God's commands to his people is do not mongrelize. Seventh commandment, do not commit adultery, is do not mongrelize your blood, do not mix your blood. He created all things kind after kind. So in God's kingdom, it works differently. And that's what MJ is referring to as the America, yes,
Okay,
founded by
so
God's people.
okay, got it. Okay, yeah. So then I'm just trying to make sense. So then the premise would be white European and, as MJ said, Protestant, which would include that you don't like marry interracial, correct?
That's right. That's right.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay. Yeah, that's all I wanted to know. It just popped up in my head.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm
I
gonna,
thank all of you for being here for this conversation. I think it's very pertinent to all of us, and I
yeah.
appreciate all of you.
Yeah,
Thank
appreciate
you.
you too, Patricia. Thank you so much for coming in tonight. And Alex, thank you for coming in. We enjoyed being with you up there in Tennessee. That was great having you up there with us.
That
MJ,
was awesome. It was so awesome. And I hope, Mike, that I'm a little bit puzzled by your comments of me inferring that I see Josh as stupid, which I never said, and which I wouldn't have
well,
any basis
yeah,
to. So that was
when people are
that
speaking
was
and yeah, I didn't,
unfound, very unfound. And
yeah,
again, I agree. Like Tennessee was awesome, and I appreciated being part of it, and it was amazing, and I even had fun with you.
yeah. No, I know, we did. It was a good time, and I didn't. Yeah, I was just blurting. Sometimes when we just say things, at the heat of the moment, the wrong words come out.
Yeah,
So
but we
yeah,
got to stay rational, just rational and clear and to the
right.
fact, to the language, not inferring anything. Stay strict to the language, just like the law does.
Right, but I
They
was getting the
stay
impression,
close
Alex,
to the
because
language, very, very
we,
close.
right, I was getting the impression with the earlier kind of stigmatic moment there we were having with you saying I wasn't getting what you're saying.
Mhm.
It's kind of a uh, personal, since you and I did have kind of a personal conversation, when we first met a few weeks ago, and it was kind of a sticking point, in terms of our harmonious relationship. It seemed to be not a problem as we move forward. Like you said, we were in Tennessee, we got along
On
fine, everything was,
you're cutting out, like on my side, you're
yeah, I
cutting
just
out.
heard
I
you
don't
cut out.
know if
Yeah, you
that's
just cut out of
just
me too.
me.
But yeah, no, so I just felt like when you were,
Uh,
kind of
Okay.
kept indicating that I wasn't getting your point earlier. I just felt like it was almost like you were just trying to play hard with me. So the fact that my son had listened to me convey what I understood about what you were trying to say, he seemed to acknowledge that I said it in consistent with what you were saying. So I just blurted it out as, I mean, that's like saying I could have said stupid. I wasn't suggesting you were saying my son was stupid, but like if as if to the extent you were asserting I wasn't getting it, like I'm not, like I don't understand or I don't know what you're saying. It seemed you were really coming on with that in a way that was excessive to me. So when I said that my son even is sitting here listening to me, and you know, so it's like saying, if you're saying I don't get it, it's like you're saying he don't get it. So I was just using the word stupid. Like if I'm stupid and I don't get it, it's like saying he's stupid, you don't get it. Not that I was inferring you were saying he was stupid. I was just trying to make that point. But I apologize. I didn't mean to assert that you were calling him stupid. I
May
think
I?
anybody
I
anybody that
think
would listen to
Patricia,
this would know that you didn't call him stupid. So
yeah, Patricia made a very good point. What was being discussed was chaos. So it wasn't really going to lead very far. I yield.
yeah, no, and and both Patricia and MJ, you made good points. Alex, I think they made good points. Both of them said that codes are codes because they're in code, because they're intended to confuse people. I think that was a profound point they both made. My son used to say that. I remember a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, when he first started really getting into Supreme Court cases, he said that often even the Supreme Court cases are kind of coded. You know, the codes are even written in code. Like you will take a word one way where they're really trying to say something else because they are trying to confound people, confuse people, and get people from really grasping what's going on. Which again
US
goes back
tax
to
codes.
that's a great example. Well, thanks again for everybody being here. Alex, thank you, Patricia, MJ, and we had some others on earlier that bailed out earlier. Uh, Tave was with us and Clint was with us. Unfortunately, Grant couldn't make it tonight, but hopefully he'll hear this and hopefully I'll see y'all again next week if you can make it. So God bless everybody. Have a great night. Have a great week.
Blessings to all of you, all of
Thank you.
us.
Amen. Thank you. Praise God Almighty.